Invincibility begins with contemplating the sun. Hey, fanfic family. So glad to see you here again to continue this incredible adventure. As always, kindly remember, this story is 100% fiction. So don't go looking for dimensional portals in your closet. All rights to this fantastic novel belong to the original author. We're just your humble narrators of epic tales. Are you enjoying the fanfic? Show it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and dropping us a like. And if you're impatient for more exclusive content, our Patreon is your happy place. Chapter 326 The Reality of Transactions. The killing array's power surged once more. The life-saving coin, which had been radiating light, protecting itself, and remaining unmoved, could no longer sit still. If things continued like this avatar would surely perish, making the next phase of the grand plan impossible. A buzzing sound rippled through the void, like waves on water. The copper coin erupted with intense energy, manifesting various demonic and bizarre forms. Upon closer inspection, one would find that these demonic and bizarre forms were vastly different from the celestial demons and monsters that had just been absorbed. These demonic and bizarre forms bared their fangs and claws, radiating malevolent energy, attempting to withstand the oppressive power of the sun and earth, relentlessly assaulting the killing array's defenses, seemingly trying to carve out a path. However, the life-saving coin avatar miscalculated. The killing array, operating at full power, had already surpassed the level of celestial beings, reaching the void heaven level. The moment the manifested demonic and bizarre forms appeared, before even reaching the array's barrier, they were directly annihilated by the earth's power and the sun's light. They couldn't even cause a ripple. At this moment, the life-saving coin was utterly panicked. His journey to the mortal realm was for a major undertaking, crucial to his own advancement, and he absolutely could not afford any mishaps. Boom! A deafening roar. The life-buying money avatar retracted all the demonic and bizarre entities, merging them into itself, thus continuously growing stronger, becoming as tall as a mountain, seemingly attempting to break through the Great Formation. However, the next moment, the Great Formation also grew larger. If the life-buying money grew even slightly, the Great Formation would grow 2 sizes larger, giving it no chance to burst, just as the vast heavens could contain all things. The ancient saints outside the formation marveled at this sight. The special principles contained within this great formation were indeed quite profound, possessing such wondrous power. They even suspected that even if this monster were as tall and large as heaven and earth, this great formation would be even larger than it, even larger than heaven and earth. This fellow Taoist Li is indeed extraordinary. He truly deserves to be the one who could cause the heavenly cycle to reincarnate. If they had possessed such methods and power in their ancient era, perhaps they wouldn't have fallen so quickly, and could have completely used this method to seal the heavenly cycle, which had become a monster. The life-buying money immediately realized it was wasting its time and flew into a rage. As a supernatural being, it was always the one manipulating others. No matter what kind of celestial demon or supernatural being it was, they could only become sacrifices to be absorbed, or agents and proxies to be controlled by it, no exceptions. But now it was in such a sorry state? If it were an ordinary avatar, it wouldn't matter. But this avatar was extraordinary, bearing a crucial mission. It couldn't die here. Therefore, the life-buying money's true form in the underworld hung slightly, causing the laws of the underworld to tremble slightly, unleashing boundless power that crossed the barrier between the underworld and the mortal realm, descending upon the avatar. Heng raised an eyebrow upon seeing this. This power could actually directly overcome the barrier of his grand formation? As expected of a supernatural being with consciousness, it possessed such methods. He wasn't too surprised by this situation. After all, he had never seriously studied the Tao of formations. Moreover, he could easily seal such a method with a little source energy. But Heng thought about it and decided against it. Since he intended to fish, he wanted to catch a big fish, one that would grow plump and delicious. What did it matter if he had the main body's assistance? If the main body descended, he'd be even happier, meaning he could harvest even more source energy. The ancient saints were startled by this and wanted to speak up. However, considering that this fellow Taoist Li might be stronger than them, and yet remained unmoved, they figured this situation was likely within his expectations, and they didn't need to say anything. So, they remained silent. They were very curious about what fellow Taoist Li could do. They could see that this power, crossing the void, was extremely strange, carrying a strong sense of order and rules, yet also radiating an eerie, profound, and corrupt aura. Even they themselves would find it extremely troublesome. Perhaps one person alone couldn't handle it, requiring multiple people working together. A deal. This great formation is mine. A venomous, chilling, and crazed voice rang out again. The mysterious trading rules took effect. Countless pieces of paper money rained down from the sky above Li Heng, and control of the grand formation shifted forcefully towards the life-buying money, gradually slipping out of Li Heng's grasp. Li Heng smiled slightly. He knew that forced buying and selling wouldn't last long. Want to buy, huh? Can you afford it? He said loudly. A trace of source energy had been mixed into the grand formation, retaining the supreme essence of source energy. If the life-buying money wanted to buy the formation, it would first have to buy source energy. But source energy was something the life-buying money couldn't afford. Sure enough, the life-buying money crashed. The rain of paper money above Li Heng's head vanished instantly. The life-buying money realized that the grand formation had suddenly become a bottomless pit, and the previously clear ownership had become blurred. It was simply beyond its means. If it hadn't sensed something was wrong and terminated the transaction in time, it would have suffered a devastating loss. Although he was a self-aware anomaly, he still had to abide by the rules. If the other party had agreed to the deal and he hadn't stopped it in time, he would also be punished by the rules. He was born of the rules were his foundation. Violating the rules was violating himself. Buying life money sighed inwardly, a rare display of humanity. He had thought this matter would proceed smoothly, but unexpectedly, a powerful obstacle had appeared. Who is this person? One of those ancient monsters who had lived for several eras, a void realm expert? But weren't those people rejected by the laws of the mortal world and unable to easily appear in the mortal realm? And at this moment, the rift had just appeared. They should all have entered that rift by now. Buying life money was extremely puzzled, many questions arising in his mind, but he quickly made a decision. He had to resolve this obstacle as soon as possible. This trip to the mortal world could not be in vain. And so, his true form directly crossed the void between the two realms, forcibly suppressing the rejection of the laws of the mortal world, and manifested before Li Heng and the ancient saints. Moreover, his figure was gradually solidifying. It seemed to be planning to descend in its true form. At this moment, all the ancient saints were shocked. They discovered that the aura of this strange entity was somewhat off, faintly exceeding the void heaven level. What was going on? Were all the old monsters in the underworld dead, allowing this strange entity to grow to this level? Weren't they afraid of destroying the underworld? Strange entities have existed since ancient times. Long before the ancient era, in a world where there was no distinction between the mortal and underworld, a calamity of strange entities had occurred. There were even rumors that it was because of that calamity that the complete world split into the mortal and underworld. Li Heng raised an eyebrow. It seemed he had really caught a big fish. He had thought the entity behind the life-buying coin would be extremely cautious and wouldn't interfere to this extent. But now it seemed this matter was very important to the life-buying coin entity, willing to risk its life to descend in its true form. And this aura was quite strong. No wonder the heavenly demon had warned him to be careful of the life-buying coin. A strange entity had quietly developed to this extent? If it weren't for the anomaly in the underworld, he would have even doubted that this life-buying money could rival the heavens. Powerful beings of the mortal realm, release my avatar and let me leave. The life-buying money communicated rationally. Li Heng shook his head. That's truly a pity, you'll regret it. The life-buying money spoke, its words rippling across the mortal realm, then erupting with terrifying rules that interconnected, forming a network covering most of the mortal world. How can the anomaly of the underworld extend its rules into reality? Are the void realm beings of the mortal realm dead? Why isn't anyone stopping it? Is this anomaly planning to refine the mortal realm? The ancient saints were greatly astonished, making the mortal realm seem like someone else's backyard. This was unimaginable in the ancient era. No, strictly speaking, I just want to trade the mortal realm. At this moment, the true form of the life-buying money completely crossed realms, standing on this vast network of rules, and said this. All right, then I'll buy your death. Li Heng said calmly with a smile. Chapter 327 I've bought your cultivation. Then die. To prevent any unforeseen complications, buying life money didn't waste any more words with Li Heng. An overwhelming pressure descended upon him, carrying a mysterious power of rules, seemingly aiming to kill him in one strike. The ancient saint's expressions were solemn. Fellow Taoist Li, should we intervene? They looked at Li Heng and asked. This strange being was extremely powerful, faintly surpassing the Void Heaven realm. They were afraid that Li Heng might be caught off guard and killed on the spot. It's alright. Li Heng smiled slightly. He knew. Buying Life Money's main body had descended for the safety of his avatar, so he might as well destroy this avatar first and harvest some source power. In an instant, the great formation exploded to its limit. Before Buying Life Money could react, his avatar, which had devoured over 20 heavenly demons and heavenly monsters and bore a heavy mission, instantly shattered, like a dream. The source power arrival notification came. Source power plus 5 million. Li Heng raised an eyebrow, slightly surprised. This was really valuable. You deserve to die. The true form of the life-buying coin roared in fury at the sight, its cold, venomous words echoing through heaven and earth, infecting the surrounding rules and laws, seemingly trying to plunge the entire mortal realm into a ghostly realm. What use is this powerless rage? Li Heng smiled faintly, flicking his finger. An invisible wave of power rippled outwards, completely dispelling the effects of the life-buying coin's powerless rage. Simultaneously, the power fluctuations transformed into a barrier, blocking all of the life-buying coin's attacks. At this moment, the intensity of the battle could no longer be concealed. The celestial realm experts in the mortal realm finally reacted, turning their gazes towards this scene, instantly gasping in shock. No wonder such a powerful force had appeared. A vast network of rules had appeared, almost covering most of the mortal realm, and the clash of forces had even subtly shaken the foundations of the mortal realm. So it was a battle between two beings above the celestial realm? At the 100 Saints Academy, several half-saints watched the scene unfold in silence. Only the impetuous Yu Fuhei couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. As expected of a senior, possessing such terrifying power. However, why do those 10 figures beside the senior feel so familiar? Their auras seem very similar to those of our 100 Saints Academy. These words reminded the other half-saints of the traces of time they had discovered on 100 Saints Mountain, and a guess arose in their hearts. They then looked at each other, wondering if it was really true. In a tavern in a small town in the western prefecture of Dali. Master, don't stop me, I want to drink my fill. The monk Taoist looked helplessly at Xiao Hao, who was drowning his sorrows in alcohol. I didn't stop you. But what exactly happened? Everything was fine just now. Xiao Hao was devastated. He thought that he knew the trajectory of the future and could have the upper hand. But one exception after another repeatedly slapped him in the face, causing him to lose many opportunities. And now, there were even experts above the celestial realm fighting? Has this world gone mad? In Jinhua City, Lai Dangkong, Meng Lingayan, Kong, and others were also watching this battle closely. After all, the scale of this battle was too immense, already affecting most of the underworld. It was fortunate that the battlefield was taking place in the no man's land, otherwise, the dynasty might have been destroyed. Lai Dangkong, Meng Lingayan, and the others were filled with admiration. They hadn't expected Li Heng to have grown to such a level. How long had it been? Even taking drugs like crazy wouldn't have made him this fast. Kong, Li Heng's maid, looked on with admiration. Her master had become stronger again. At this moment, the goddess of heaven, who was part of the heavens, also contacted Li Heng through the unseen rules and laws. Li Heng, do you want me to help you? This strange entity in the underworld is too arrogant, daring to openly manifest in the mortal world. Does it really think that because the heavens of the mortal world are split, no one can subdue it? The goddess of heaven's words were filled with murderous intent. Although she was not a complete part of the heavens, and to avoid being corrupted herself, she could not deeply control the laws of heaven and earth to directly suppress this life-saving coin. However, he could still lend a hand to Li Heng. Oh, you actually showed up? It seems this life-saving coin is no ordinary item. At such a critical moment, Li Heng even had time to chat with this goddess of heaven. I only just found out myself. This monster is so audacious and its methods so mysterious, it actually managed to deceive the heavens and lay down such a powerful scheme in the mortal world. The goddess of heaven gritted her teeth, extremely angry. She's becoming more and more human-like. Li Heng rolled his eyes upon hearing this. That's really unreliable. I appreciate your kindness, but I can handle this monster, so I don't need you to snatch, cough cough, help me. But after I help you get rid of this major threat, shouldn't you tell me your name? Almost blurting out the truth, Li Heng quickly corrected himself and teased the goddess of heaven. then collided terrifyingly with a life-saving coin that was attacking him, creating mushroom clouds one after another. Above the 9 heavens, in the darkness, the celestial goddess stood there, stunned upon hearing Li Heng's last words. She fell into deep thought. A name? A powerful being of this world, you are very strong, the life-buying coin uttered a seemingly pointless remark amidst the clashes. So, what then? Li Heng chuckled. In these few rounds of clashes, he had roughly gauged the life-buying coin's basic strength, half a step beyond the void realm, yet still within it, belonging to the strongest within the void realm. However, as long as it remained within the void realm, it was no match for his invincible void realm opponent. But due to its strange immortality, coupled with the seemingly unusual material of the life-buying coin's copper body, Li Heng couldn't defeat it with his raw strength alone. I've bought your formidable strength, the life-buying coin coldly declared, its words startling. Li Heng raised an eyebrow. Your strength wasn't all bought, was it? The life-buying coin didn't answer, but its attitude seemed to be an admission. He ignored Li Heng's willingness to trade strength, and the mysterious trading rules within his body erupted, manifesting a vast scale in the void. Li Heng and the life-buying money each occupied one side, balancing the two. This was very similar to the scene of buying and selling the strange official report back then. Interesting. Li Heng smiled slightly. Because he felt that under the restriction of that mysterious trading rule, he was unable to leave the coverage area of this scale and was forced to accept the life-buying money's transaction. Unless he mobilized the reincarnation law and directly added great power to himself, he might be able to destroy the scale. Or he could use his source power to bypass the scale transaction. At this moment, the life-buying money was not wasting any time and added weight to his side of the scale. A rain of paper money fell from the sky and gathered on the scale, and the scale gradually shifted towards the life-buying money's side. Li Heng also sensed that under the influence of a mysterious power, his cultivation was changing, being shaken, as if it wanted to leave his body and go to the life-buying money's side. This power seemed more profound than the trading power that had appeared in the previous transactions involving strange official reports. It was like an enhanced version. He shook his head. This money for buying life was truly a case of if you don't court death, you won't die. It was one thing for the original body to come to the mortal world, but if it had run fast enough, he wouldn't have been able to stop it. But now it actually wanted to play a game of trade, play by the rules? Did it consider whether it had enough financial resources? You want to buy me, then I'll buy you. Li Heng smiled slightly and began to raise the stakes. Chapter 328 Unlimited Overdraft. The man who bought his life was extremely confident in this deal. Before he reached his peak, an old monster from the void realm of the underworld had tried to stop him, but he had still managed to forcibly acquire that old monster's void realm cultivation. It was precisely because of this that other void realm cultivators in the underworld dared not provoke him. This deal was inherently unfair. Even if this powerful being from the present world had some trump card that even his current wealth couldn't buy, it would be useless. Because he could infinitely overdraw his credit. As long as the unseen rules determined that he would be able to repay the debt in the future, he could borrow without limit. And as a supernatural being, immortal and indestructible, he theoretically had unlimited time. Therefore, unless the debt became an incredibly large sum, even with his abilities, it would only increase over time. Otherwise, there was no possibility of being unable to repay it. In short, his credit was unlikely to fail. He had relied on this very tactic to cause that old monster from the void realm to fail. Although this powerful being was strong, he was ultimately still at the void realm level. Given his unlimited borrowing ability, he could potentially buy even those above the void realm, so this time would be no exception. It was merely at the void realm level. How could his credit be ruined? Buying life money smiled inwardly, banishing all doubts and fears of the unknown from his mind. Ceasing to consider these possibilities, they were all impossible anyway. Overthinking would only lead to more mistakes and hesitation. As time passed, a tug-of-war ensued. However, just as buying life money had anticipated, the scales of the transaction were subtly tipping in his favor, giving him the temporary upper hand. Li Heng raised an eyebrow. Although he possessed profound strength, he couldn't infinitely increase his bets. Buying life money's chips seemed truly unlimited. However much he added, buying life money matched him perfectly, displaying immense wealth. Even in the end, he began to utilize the law of reincarnation, gradually betting on the netherworld. But buying life money still relentlessly followed, surpassing him once again. The ancient saints beside him observed the situation and sensed something was amiss. Li Daoyao seemed to be at a disadvantage. They all sent telepathic messages to Li Heng, asking if he needed help. If you were to accidentally capsize, it would be a tragedy, a matter of life and death, and there was no time to delay. The voice of the heavenly goddess rang in Li Heng's ears again. She was somewhat anxious. Li Heng, how are you now? I am mobilizing the rules and laws of heaven and earth, intending to dismantle this strange scale. Hold on a little longer, I am still trying. As a part of heaven, a continuation of the normal heaven, this heavenly goddess could see more than the ancient saints beside her, such as Li Heng's precarious situation. If the scale completely tipped in favor of the life-buying money, then Li Heng's cultivation would truly be bought off by the life-buying money, and even she could not stop it. Not a single drop would be left. In various parts of the mortal world, many powerful figures observing this battle also felt a chill in their hearts. Although they were far away, unaware of the truth, and unable to see clearly, they could still sense who had the upper hand. And the life-buying money was very strange and evil, clearly not something from their mortal world. Some well-informed powerful figures had already recognized the strange identity of the life-buying money underworld being and were even more unwilling to let him gain the upper hand and win this great battle. What if life-buying money won and that powerful figure was defeated and killed? Would the mortal world suffer a catastrophic disaster? Although there were indeed other void realm powerhouses in the mortal world, such as some ancient monsters who had lived for several eras, they were not in the mortal world at the moment. Damn it, why did it have to be at this time? Some celestial realm powerhouses who knew the inside story cursed inwardly. Life-buying money had already sensed Li Heng's newly added chips. At this moment, his wealth was far from enough, but that didn't matter, since he could borrow infinitely. The netherworld, the cycle of heaven and earth? After sensing it, he was overjoyed. He didn't expect that this mortal world powerhouse was actually the one who opened the cycle of reincarnation. He had made a huge profit this time. Originally, he was wondering if it was worth using such a power that consumed so much energy here. But now it seemed completely worth it. The cycle of heaven and earth, that was something that the Yellow Springs Road could only dream of but never obtain. Although this cycle of reincarnation was useless to him, he could easily resell it to the Underworld Road and make a fortune. Useless? My bargaining chips are beyond your imagination. The life-buying money chuckled in a surprisingly human way. You actually created the cycle of reincarnation in this world? It seems I underestimated you. But you have no idea how terrifying my abilities are. You can't beat me. However, I can give you a chance. Sign a contract, become my agent, my proxy, and work for me. That way, I might let you go. The life-buying money began to tempt Li Heng. Although his credit could be unlimited, he still had to repay what he borrowed. He didn't want to borrow so much unless absolutely necessary. Li Heng's expression remained unchanged, perfectly calm. But the life-buying money's words stunned the ancient sages who were observing the situation, ready to intervene at any moment. This fellow Taoist Li not only allowed reincarnation, but was also the one who created it. They were shocked. Even in their golden age of ancient saints, no one had ever successfully opened the cycle of reincarnation. It was a completely forbidden thing. Yet this fellow Taoist Li had succeeded. The words about the life-buying money were not hidden. Using the laws and rules of heaven and earth as a medium, they spread almost throughout the entire mortal world. Hearing this, the powerful beings of the mortal world were filled with doubt and uncertainty. This person was actually a great being who had opened the cycle of reincarnation? But why did even such a great being fall behind? Was this life-buying money really that terrifying? Some people felt embarrassed and ashamed because they had also used life-buying money to do many things. But from a strange perspective, this was helping to spread and grow. The fact that life-buying money could grow to this extent was a man-made disaster. I have a question for you. What is your background that allows you to have such abilities? Li Heng asked in confusion. This time, the scales of exchange could even be traded with his cultivation, which contained the essence of the Great Japan, the power of the earth, and even the laws of reincarnation, although this was because he had not yet fully grown. But that's too outrageous. You finally figured it out? I'm indeed neither from the underworld nor the mortal realm. But knowing won't change anything. Either become my dog, or why let me absorb your cultivation? The life-buying money spoke, its voice filled with resentment, curses, and terror. Li Heng nodded, realizing the truth. He shook his head dejectedly. So I've run into a cheater. No wonder it's so outrageous. Li Heng sighed. He had originally planned to fight normally, saving his source energy for future plans. But who would have thought this world would be so absurd? Everyone's cheating? Then he could only use a major cheat to show others what a minor cheat is. Fine, you, and this scale, I've bought them all. Li Heng said calmly. His current 8 million units of source energy erupted. Chapter 329 The Balance of Trade. Upon hearing this, Buying Life Money wanted to scoff. To actually think he could buy the scales? Utterly delusional. These scales were manifestations of unseen rules, pervading the vast void. What he had summoned was merely a phantom, utterly impossible to buy. He also didn't believe Li Heng, at the Void Realm, possessed such wealth. But the next moment, he noticed the scales were shifting again, tilting towards Li Heng. Buying Life Money was stunned. What was going on? What kind of bargaining chip had this powerful being added to gradually overwhelm him? This shouldn't be happening. If he kept adding to the stakes, he could buy the entire mortal world. He hardened his heart, believing this was a temporary counterattack by Li Heng, and decided to continue using his credit, borrowing infinitely. He didn't believe this man could outlast him. However, after a while, Buying Life Money found the scales still slowly tilting towards Li Heng. No matter how much he overdrawn his credit, borrowing infinitely, Li Heng was still ahead. Now, he was completely dumbfounded. What was happening? Could this person also borrow indefinitely? But that shouldn't be the case. If this person could borrow indefinitely, he wouldn't have been at a disadvantage earlier. Even if we assume this person could borrow indefinitely, he should at most be able to balance him out. Why is he still able to outbid him? A sense of dread washed over him. Because if he continued borrowing indefinitely like this, the time it would take to repay his debts would be endless. In the end, he might not even be able to pay the interest, and his credit would be completely bankrupt. Li Heng raised an eyebrow, quite intrigued. When he placed his source energy bet earlier, he could faintly feel the scales trembling, as if they couldn't withstand this source energy, but in the end, they barely managed to withstand it and didn't collapse directly. However, as he continued to inject source energy and increase the bet, the trembling of the scales became more and more intense. When he added 4 million points of source energy, the scales were already trembling so much that they were somewhat blurred, as if they were about to break at any moment. Buying Life Money also noticed the abnormality of the scales. Being a user of the strange rules, he knew some of the inside story and immediately felt a sense of dread. Could it be that this person's foundation is so immense that even the illusory image of the scales cannot withstand it? How is this possible? Even if this scale is just an illusion, it should at least be able to trade a complete world. How could it not withstand the foundation of someone at the Void Realm? Has the Great Void gone mad? With his credit on the verge of bankruptcy and the scales he summoned exhibiting abnormalities, Buying Life Money knew that this transaction could not continue and had to be terminated. As a powerful rule anomaly, Buying Life Money could actually forcibly terminate this transaction, but that would severely damage his vitality, causing him to fall a level and return to his previous weak state. However, he couldn't care less about that now. If things continued like this, either his credit would go bankrupt and he would be directly taken back by the rules in the dark, or the scales would malfunction and break, causing him to be punished by the rules in the dark. Either way, it would be a fate almost like death. It was better to make a clean break. In this instant, the tide of attack and defense turned. The ancient sages nearby were astonished. They simply couldn't understand why Li Heng had suddenly gained the upper hand. There was no fluctuation whatsoever. It defied all logic. Could this be the method of the one who created reincarnation? Truly unpredictable. In that instant, they even felt that the great calamity of heaven and earth, that extremely terrifying and dangerous pollution, might just be nothing more than that. Most of the powerful figures in the mortal world were excited. Indeed, one could not draw conclusions hastily about a duel at this level. The great being who created reincarnation had regained the upper hand, while the strange creature that bought Life Money seemed somewhat terrified, as if it had completely fallen into a disadvantageous position. The mortal world was saved. As for the small group, the powerful figures of the various dynasties scattered throughout the mortal world had somewhat ugly expressions. They cursed the strange creature that bought Life Money as a piece of trash, wondering why they had chosen to cooperate with it and help it build its rule network. Especially in the families of the Great Li, an uninvited guest arrived. It was a humanoid silhouette. Li Heng immediately sensed that the creature that bought Life Money wanted to terminate the transaction. He smiled contemptuously. Could play the game and wanted to run away? Sorry, you no longer have the means to escape in one strike. He spoke calmly, I won't allow it. The transaction continues. Upon hearing this, the power to terminate the transaction with the life-buying money was immediately revoked, and the transaction continued smoothly amidst the trembling of the scales, tilting towards him. The life-buying money was dumbfounded. How could this person control the scales and the transaction? This was clearly his unique power, the exclusive power of the strange entity. This person was merely a human in the mortal world. How could he have the ability to control the scales? What was going on? Sensing the wave of doubt emanating from the life-buying money, Heng tilted his head, a half-smile on his face, and asked, You don't think that what I said earlier about buying you in the scale was a lie, do you? His words struck the life-buying money like a hammer blow. His first reaction was that this was impossible. Heng was lying to him. After all, this scale was just a phantom, a manifestation of the rules of the unseen world, and there was absolutely no possibility of it being bought and sold. Why don't you just say you can buy and sell the Great Void? That was what he originally intended to say to mock Heng. But the thought that this situation had actually occurred, that this powerful being truly possessed the ability to interfere with the scales of trade, made him swallow his words, unsure what to say. Logically and rationally, this was impossible. Yet, such a situation had indeed arisen in reality. Just as Heng had said, he was attempting to buy the scale of trade. However, the scale seemed to have an instinct, strongly resisting and preventing the transaction from proceeding smoothly. The current violent trembling of the scales might also be related to this. But Heng didn't care about any of that. Before using his source power, the scale had dragged him here, forcing him to buy his life for money without any reason. So what if he was now forcing his way in? You were unreasonable before, now I'll be unreasonable too. As the transaction progressed, Heng increasingly felt the power and immense origin of the scales of trade. However, no matter how strong the power or how great the origin, compared to source power, it was like heaven and earth. Even with the scale's strong resistance, the transaction continued smoothly. Measuring the value of all things, it can trade for everything in the vast void. Heng looked at this enormous scale, smiled slightly, and gradually understood its essence. The ownership of the scale was irreversibly shifting towards his side. He estimated that if he added another million source energy, reaching 5 million, then the scale would belong to him. I'll fight you to the death. At this moment, buying life money finally realized that he had no way out. He had to absolutely defeat Heng in this transaction, otherwise he would have no hope. So, he began a frantic, unlimited borrowing spree, even if the interest generated by the loans completely exceeded his repayment ability. Even if he really went bankrupt, he would continue to borrow frantically in the period before the bankruptcy liquidation. He was going to gamble. If he could buy everything this person had, perhaps he could use this person's entire foundation to repay his debts, successfully turn the tables, and even make a fortune. Heng looked at him strangely. You don't actually think you're worth 5 million source energy, do you? Chapter 330 You're just an add-on. Buying life money was unaware of this. He only wanted to fight to the death. However, ideals are often far from reality. When two cheat codes meet, Heng ultimately prevails. No matter how frantically buying life money borrowed, Heng remained superior. At this moment, buying life money was on the verge of bankruptcy. If he borrowed just a little more, it would be the last straw that broke the camel's back. The unseen rules determined that he was unable to repay the debt and would be liquidated. At this moment, a sense of fear arose. The strange creature was immortal, but its consciousness would perish. Once it was liquidated and taken back by the rules, its consciousness would be instantly shattered, returning to its purest strange nature. At that time, what difference would there be between itself and being dead? Heng was no longer focusing on buying life money, but concentrating on observing the state of the scales. They trembled violently, and even cracks had appeared in their subtle details. The scale's resistance had reached its limit. Even if it meant self-destruction, it didn't want Heng to have it. Heng wasn't too worried about this. Source power was omnipotent. It's simply a matter of adding a little more source energy. But is it necessary? Heng could sense that source energy held a transcendent status, surpassing even the scales of this transaction, and perhaps even the unseen rules. If he chose to buy the scales, he would consume a corresponding amount of source energy. But if he changed his mind, He could use even more source energy to burst the scales, then reclaim the energy without losing a single bit, thus resolving the crisis. After all, it would be equivalent to the transaction not being completed, and the scales being the first to succumb to the source energy. So the question arose, was it worth spending over 5 million points of source energy, 5 million of which was used to forcibly purchase the scales, and then another portion to prevent them from self-destructing? Li Heng fell into deep thought. At this moment, seeing Li Heng's lack of reaction and action, the life-buying money immediately realized this was an opportunity. Had this person reached his limit and run out of bargaining chips? The thought of this possibility filled him with ecstatic joy, causing him to break through his self-imposed limits and frantically borrow money, pushing himself to the point of complete credit bankruptcy, hoping to buy Li Heng's cultivation level and everything Li Heng possessed, thus recouping his losses and turning the tables. However, the next moment, when he placed all his borrowed chips on the scales, he discovered to despair that Li Heng was still on top of him. The scales had not tipped in his favor. No. Buying life money roared, his voice echoing throughout the world, like the last roar of someone falling into an endless abyss, its sound shrill and lingering, chilling to the bone. Li Heng, regaining his composure, calmly spoke. It seems the game is over. Why do you have so many chips? You're just a mere void realm cultivator. How is this possible? How did you do it? Did you also borrow unlimited amounts? You will end up like me. Buying life money went completely mad. Like a gambler who has lost everything, or a seasoned stock market investor who sees all his investments turn red. Upon hearing this, Li Heng smiled lightly, unconvinced. He knew this life-buying money used such methods. Loans and credit overdrafts. After all, judging from the current stakes, the life-buying money was enough to buy and sell a region of the mortal world, far beyond what a mere void realm monster could possess. However, unfortunately, his own capital far exceeded the life-buying money's expectations. At this moment, Li Heng had already made his decision to buy this trading balance, even if it cost over 5 million points of source energy. He could vaguely sense that this balance had a tremendous origin, and if used well, its effects would be terrifying, perhaps bringing him new variables in the hope of saving the world. Now, with this source energy stake exceeding 5 million, the ownership of the trading balance had irreversibly shifted towards him, along with the life-buying money as an add-on. Although the trading balance resisted stubbornly, under Li Heng's continuous addition of source energy, its resistance and self-destruction were futile, and it completely subsided. If the balance of power in this transaction possessed any wisdom, it would surely regret not immediately self-destructing, giving Li Heng this opportunity. The man who bought his life was now utterly desperate. His credit was exhausted, he was bankrupt. The unseen rules would completely reclaim him, even if he still existed, he wouldn't be the one left. But at this moment, he was astonished to discover that his ownership, everything he had, was shifting towards Li Heng. He was stunned. This person really intended to buy him? A surge of joy and despair rose within him. Joy because he had dragged Li Heng down with him. Since Li Heng had bought everything from the man who bought his life, he also inherited the man's debts, and he would have to repay those debts. The man who bought his life felt that this might be the final straw. If this person was also unable to repay these debts, he would surely be punished by the rules and executed. It would be a mutual destruction. But he was an anomaly, immortal and indestructible. If given the chance, what if he could regain his original consciousness? But this person is merely a living being of flesh and blood, once killed by the rules, he is truly dead. From this perspective, he holds the advantage. However, Li Heng doesn't care, he had already anticipated this. He had already said that the life-buying money was just an add-on. How much debt could an add-on possibly incur? Sure enough, he sensed it slightly, and the total cost of the trading balance, including the life-buying money and the debt, was only 6 million points of source energy, roughly as he had expected. More than 5 million points were used to purchase and stabilize the trading balance. And several 100,000 were used to pay off the debt incurred from the life-buying money. After careful calculation, he still made a profit. Because this life-buying money was at least at the Void Heaven realm, worth at least 1 million points of source energy, or even more, since this life-buying money was considered very strong at the Void Heaven realm. Therefore, even if he killed the life-buying money immediately, the source energy he obtained would definitely exceed 1 million, completely compensating for the cost of the life-buying money and the source energy needed to repay the debt. As for how to kill the monster, Li Heng wasn't too worried. If you're strong enough, You can always kill him. At the very least, you can directly ask the omnipotent source energy to do it. The consumption won't be too much. But if you ignore it and let this life-buying money go bankrupt and be taken back by the unseen rules, then you won't get any source energy from the life-buying money. Instead, you'll lose even more. Lee never does unprofitable business. As for why only a small amount of source energy is needed to buy the life-buying money itself and repay the debt, Heng can roughly guess the reason. It's simply because source energy is too transcendent. A little source energy can be used as many points. How transcendent? Let's put it this way. The chips Heng placed on the scales weren't direct source energy, but rather a special downgraded product formed through source energy transformation. This is why the scales can withstand it, and understand and acknowledge it. At this moment, the life-buying money is dumbfounded. Because it realizes that its debt has been completely repaid by Heng, and its ownership has been completely taken over by Heng. It has become this person's plaything. Who knows how this person will manipulate it? And it has become this person's plaything. This person also has the right to erase their own consciousness directly. This is an even worse ending than being taken back by the rules. Don't come any closer. Buying life money screamed in terror. At this moment, in a secluded place in Delhi, the humanoid figure looked at the many powerful families present, smiled slightly, and said, "Now you should know, that person is a flawed existence and must be eliminated." If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 331: The Mysteries of Noble Families. We understand the principles, but who exactly are you? How do you know the details of our aristocratic families? An ancestor of one of the aristocratic families spoke up. He was none other than a celestial being. A powerful aristocratic family would have at least one celestial being. The humanoid figure smiled slightly upon hearing this. Of course I know, and I know everything. Your aristocratic families have a deep connection with me. We both originate from the same source, so you don't need to be hostile towards me. You only need to know one thing: the one who opened the cycle of reincarnation is our common enemy. We must eliminate him, or the consequences will be endless. The powerful members of the aristocratic families fell into deep thought upon hearing this. You say you want to cooperate with our aristocratic families, but what can you offer? Don't forget, this person is a powerful being who opened the cycle of reincarnation, and he has now defeated that strange life-buying money. In front of this person, our aristocratic families can only protect themselves. How easy is it to eliminate him? Some powerful members of the aristocratic families raised objections. The humanoid figure continued to smile. Gentlemen, there's no need to worry. With the combined forces of all the powerful families in the world, we can set up a world-shaking killing trap. Even if this person is truly invincible in the void heaven realm, he will still perish here. Don't you all have confidence in your bloodlines? After a brief silence, the powerful members of the powerful families spoke up. Then tell me what to do, said Heng. The life-buying coin had become his plaything, its body shrinking infinitely, transforming into a small copper coin, which Heng played with in his hand. In his other hand, a small scale floated. Life-buying coin, tell me, is there anyone who has joined forces with you to make you resort to such methods in the mortal world? Heng looked at the vast network of rules covering most of the mortal world, and said calmly. Although the life-buying coin was very powerful in the void heaven realm, it was impossible for it to silently set up a scheme in the mortal world unless someone was colluding with it from the inside and betraying it. Powerful families. The life-buying coin also recognized the truth. As Heng's plaything, it had no way to resist Heng's will. Despite its unwillingness, it could only helplessly tell the truth. Aristocratic families? Heng raised an eyebrow, somewhat surprised. This level of matter actually involved aristocratic families? He had initially thought they were minor players in the entire mortal realm, but now it seemed they weren't. The aristocratic families appeared to be hiding their true strength. You, at your level, are cooperating with aristocratic families? Are they very powerful? Heng asked calmly. The man named Buying Life Money replied woodenly, from my observation, aristocratic families aren't particularly strong, but they possess a mysterious power within their bloodlines. If combined, their power might surpass that of the void heaven realm. Moreover, Aristocratic families are scattered throughout the mortal realm, in many dynasties. By cooperating with them, and combining this with the strange realms opened up by the Yellow Springs Road, we can weave network nodes across various regions, forming this vast network of rules that covers the entire mortal realm. However, just as we were about to succeed, the master appeared. Li Heng seemed thoughtful upon hearing this. He had long ago noticed something strange about the aristocratic family's bloodlines, but hadn't investigated them deeply. But now it seemed necessary to investigate further. According to you, your cooperation with the aristocratic families is to weave a vast network of rules to cover the mortal realm, become its master, and then trade it away to advance your own power. But that's only your interest. What about the aristocratic family's interests? If they don't have any benefit, why would they cooperate with you? Li Heng continued to ask. I don't know either, because the aristocratic families approached me first. I used the power of the Yellow Springs Road to lay down some schemes in the mortal realm, which they discovered. However, they didn't eliminate my schemes. Instead, they contacted me and said they wanted to help me. Money for Life answered respectfully. Aren't you afraid of some conspiracy? Li Heng's expression turned somewhat strange upon hearing this. Master is joking. Everyone has their own calculations. I don't care what the aristocratic families are thinking. As long as I can successfully weave the vast network of rules to cover the mortal realm, I will be the ultimate winner. Money for Life said this with great confidence. Li Heng smiled slightly and said nothing. The life-buying money scheme aimed to control the mortal realm using the vast network of rules, but the powerful families, already in the mortal world, were actually helping it. This went beyond being merely a collaborator. Perhaps the families wanted to reap the rewards at the last moment? And that mysterious bloodline was their source of confidence? Li Heng shook his head, temporarily putting these thoughts aside. He looked at the life-buying money. Do you know why I bought you and spared your life? The life-buying money was bewildered and confused. What kind of talk was this? It was as if you could really kill me. I am a monster, immortal and indestructible. The life-buying money felt a surge of pride. But then he quickly remembered how easily Li Heng could erase his consciousness, and his spirits sank. His emotions were like a roller coaster, rising and falling wildly. Please enlighten me, Master. He dared not oppose Li Heng now. The netherworld I created just happens to lack a useful currency, so I've decided on you. From now on, change your name to Netherworld Coin. The name Life-Buying Money sounds ominous, Li Heng said with a slight smile. The renamed Life-Buying Money was momentarily stunned. Why did it feel like Ghost Money was even more unlucky? Li Heng ignored the Life-Buying Money's opinion, flicking his finger through the void and sending it into the netherworld to be transformed by its cycle of reincarnation into Ghost Money. He was just trying it out. If it worked, he wouldn't mind sparing its life. But if it failed, he'd have to harvest its source energy. Hopefully, the Life-Buying Money would be clever. His attention shifted to the scales of exchange. The scales of exchange were merely a phantom, not the actual entity within the rules of the underworld. Transactions had an upper limit, roughly reaching the level of a single mortal realm. However, it was still very useful to Li Heng. He knew that he could use this scale to multiply his source energy. As long as it was within the scope of a single realm, he could use it as leverage to accomplish more difficult tasks with less source energy. Take buying the Life-Buying Money, for example. Buying it directly with source energy might cost over $1 million. But he used this scale of exchange, betting his source energy, making a small amount of source energy seem like a lot, and buying the life-saving money required didn't even cost $1 million source energy. If just a phantom could have such leverage, what would the real thing be like? Li Heng's eyes gleamed. He felt he absolutely had to get his hands on the real scale of exchange in the future, continue leveraging it, and soar to the heavens. The real scale of exchange, in the darkness, couldn't help but shudder. The ancient saints beside him gathered around. They wanted to know how Li Heng had managed to so easily resolve this powerful anomaly. But before they could speak, Li Heng spoke first. I'd like to ask, did your era have aristocratic families? Chapter 332 Goddess Shinaiao. Aristocratic families, your era? Hearing these two words, the ancient sages were quite surprised. They didn't seem to have told this fellow Taoist Li about their origins, so how did he know? Li Heng smiled slightly. I am very sensitive to the aura and traces of time. Moreover, I recently visited Hundred Saints Mountain and saw that mountain peak that rises above half of the river of time. The sages were startled. Fellow Taoist Li, you've been to 100 Saints Mountain? That's wonderful. I'd like to ask you something. After we arrived at this point in time, we discovered that the divine medicines and inheritances we left on 100 Saints Mountain had been completely wiped out. Do you know who did this? Heng of the legalist school asked excitedly. Li Heng's expression was somewhat strange. I don't know. Li Heng shamelessly tried to evade the question. The other sages, seeing Li Heng's answer, didn't suspect anything, but felt a little regretful. After all, even with Li Heng's strength and realm, he couldn't have done something like wiping out all the divine medicines and inheritances. That's a pity. I was originally planning to catch that thief and give him a beating. Heng sighed, shook his head, and said helplessly. Ahem, let's get down to business. Did noble families exist in your era? Or rather, did noble families with extraordinary bloodlines exist? Li Heng thought for a moment and added the prefix extraordinary bloodlines. Normally, in ancient fantasy worlds like this one, which are intertwined with feudalism, noble families would definitely exist. And the basic definition of a noble family is a family of high social standing that has been passed down through generations. For example, families composed of various princes and nobles. But what Li Heng wanted to ask about was a noble family with a mysterious bloodline. Adding a prefix might make it easier to distinguish. The sages pondered for a moment, and Confucius stepped forward and spoke. Fellow Taoist Li, if you're talking about noble families, then of course they exist. But if you're talking about noble families with extraordinary bloodlines, I don't know about this era, but they didn't exist in our time. Li Heng raised an eyebrow upon hearing this, somewhat surprised. That's strange. According to the propaganda of those aristocratic families, their bloodline is incredibly noble and ancient, extending to the ancient era, even the age of immortals and gods. But now, these sages from the ancient era claim that no such extraordinary bloodlines existed in ancient times? Does this mean that the origin of these aristocratic bloodlines is after the ancient era? Or perhaps, not ancient, but entirely new? Old Kong, are you being too meticulous with your words? Don't forget, some powerful individuals establish families, and their descendants inherit that powerful individual's power. This can also be considered as possessing an extraordinary bloodline from birth, Heng of the legalist school said calmly. Li Heng's expression remained largely unchanged. He knew that the essence of those aristocratic bloodlines was definitely not simple. The power of their ancestors, passed down, must have contained some strange and unusual elements. Okay, I understand, Li Heng nodded. However, the ancient sages seemed very curious and began to speak. Why did fellow Taoist Li suddenly bring this up? Could it be that there truly exist families in this era born with extraordinary bloodlines? If so, it's not a good thing. That's right. The mere inheritance of power from the strong weakens with each generation. It doesn't last forever and may even hinder the development of future generations. But if one is born with extraordinary bloodlines, it will continue indefinitely. That means the strong get stronger, the weak get weaker, and those born superior will inevitably face various forms of oppression. The sages spoke with extremely solemn expressions. Perhaps this is the reason for the current era's decline? After all, they all believe that after so many years of development, this point in time must have far more powerful individuals than their ancient era, perhaps even those above the void heaven realm. This was why they were full of hope, the reason they came from ancient times to the present. But now? Only a handful of powerful figures. There aren't even many at the void heaven realm. The 10 of them could probably sweep through this era. If it weren't for the emergence of someone like Li Heng, whose strength they didn't even know, they would have begun to doubt whether they had made a wrong decision, perhaps even wishing they had perished alongside the ancient times. Li Heng didn't hide anything and told the ancient sages everything he knew about aristocratic families. They were somewhat surprised upon hearing this. They were now certain that such aristocratic families could not have existed in ancient times, capable of passing down extraordinary bloodlines generation after generation without any ancestral marks hindering the development of their descendants. This aristocratic family is problematic. They actually colluded with the monsters of the underworld to devour the mortal world. They deserve to die. After their analysis, they reached this conclusion together. In that case, why don't you all come with me to visit this aristocratic family? Li Heng smiled slightly, decisive and efficient, without delay. We naturally know the importance of this matter, but we have also come to this era for important matters. Time is of the essence, and we must prioritize to avoid unnecessary losses. Confucius slowly spoke. Li Heng nodded. I understand that. You have come to this era, presumably for the pollution and calamities. But you don't need to rush. If the sky falls, the tall ones will hold it up, and the tall ones can still hold it up now. The sages were surprised. Who was this tall one? Could there truly be an extraordinary powerhouse in this era? Li Heng smiled slightly. Since you've actually arrived in this era, you must be aware of the current state of the world. To put it simply, it's terminally ill, and the entire world is on the verge of collapse and distortion. But this hasn't happened yet, it's still relatively peaceful. There is indeed a powerful figure holding the line. However, I cannot tell you who this powerful figure is unless he wishes to see you. Even if I forcibly take you to see him, you won't be able to. I can give you a hint. Look at the sky. Li Heng pointed to the sky, and the saints followed his finger, seeing the vast horizon and the great sun radiating boundless light, illuminating all things. Instantly, their pupils contracted, recalling a certain legend. Could it be? They exchanged glances, their expressions serious, and nodded. We understand. The saints spoke in unison, inwardly amazed. As expected of fellow Taoist Li, so profound and unfathomable, to even receive the attention of that being, he is likely the first person in history to do so. Suddenly, the weather in the sky changed drastically. A figure slowly descended from the sky. As the distance closed, it became clear that this figure was dressed in palace attire, graceful and elegant, with unparalleled beauty and a lovely face, undoubtedly the celestial goddess. The saints were astonished upon seeing her. What was going on? How could this person possess such overwhelming divine might? The celestial goddess looked at Li Heng, her crimson lips parting slightly. Li Heng, my name is Yuan Yao. Furthermore, I have found traces of the celestial reincarnation. The first sentence resonated in Li Heng's heart. The second sentence echoed in everyone's ears, causing a tremor in the hearts of the saints. Chapter 333 The Center of the Present World. Who are you, and why do you know the whereabouts of the reincarnation of heaven? The saints were startled and hurriedly asked. Tian Yao glanced at the saints and said calmly, I naturally know, for I am heaven. Facing these ancient saints, guests who did not belong to this era, outsiders, her attitude was not as gentle and polite as it was towards Li Heng. Instead, she reverted to the cold indifference and arrogance of a heaven. They were shocked. This person was actually heaven? What was going on? Wasn't heaven reincarnated? At this moment, Li Heng smiled slightly and spoke. You all do not know, but the heaven of the present world has split. The reincarnated heaven has become a monster, a mutated heaven. And the one before us is a normal heaven, standing on our side. Tian Yao did not answer, remaining silent, seemingly acquiescing. Tian Yao, a nice name, but it was just chosen, wasn't it? Li Heng's teasing words rang in her ears. Tian Yao hesitated for a moment, then nodded slightly, acknowledging it. She secretly transmitted her voice to Li Heng. Let's get down to business. I sensed that monster's aura appearing somewhere. Her expression suggested she was fleeing in panic. Li Heng chuckled and shook his head. Forget it, he'd let her off the hook for now. At this moment, the ancient saints looked at Li Heng, all displaying an expression that seemed to say, Are you two conspiring to deceive us? Their expressions clearly showed disbelief. Seeing this, Li Heng calmly spoke, Why would I need to deceive you? These words directly silenced the ancient saints who were about to voice their doubts. Because with Li Heng's strength and realm, there was indeed no need for him to deceive them. Moreover, this heaven also possessed a strong divine might. Gradually accepting this fact, these ancient saints still felt that this era was too insane. Since ancient times, there have never been two suns in the sky, let alone a single heaven. But now, the heaven had actually split. It was truly fortunate that heaven and earth hadn't immediately exploded. Alright, let's get down to business. Where did that reincarnation aura of Yuan appear? Just tell us directly. These are all sages from the ancient era, trustworthy, Li Heng said with a smile. Tian Yao nodded. This situation once again surprised these ancient sages. This fellow Taoist Li seems to have a close relationship with this Tian. He can persuade Tian with just a few words? Is this truly worthy of being the one being watched? The aura of that monster appeared in the center of the present world, Tian Yao said slowly. The center of the present world? Li Heng raised an eyebrow slightly. The center of the present world is where laws and spiritual energy converge, a place where the strong contend. It's the border of many dynasties, a complex place with intertwined forces, strong figures from various dynasties, sects, and those inherited families. Tian Yao explained. Li Heng's expression turned strange upon hearing this. He remembered that the 100 Sages Academy was located in such a place. So, he really had been to the center of the present world, although he didn't find anything special about it. Perhaps his standards were too high? It seems that Monster is quite adept at choosing its location. This kind of place can probably allow it to recover rapidly and return to its peak. If it's not stopped before then, once that monster regains its heavenly position, it will likely launch an immediate attack, causing the world to fall instantly, Li Heng said slowly after analyzing the situation. Interesting, even a place like this has powerful families? Could the appearance of that monster's heaven be related to powerful families? For example, could it be that a powerful family wants to help the reincarnation of that heaven, or is this just bait to lure someone there? Li Heng smiled and casually mentioned a few possibilities. Of course, none of these were based on any evidence, they were just boundless associations, like an ordinary person thinking about daily necessities and then suddenly jumping to the other side of the universe, imagining themselves as aliens. However, he took these possibilities quite seriously. He had a premonition. Powerful families have a long history of misdeeds, and now they are involved in the strange life buying money and weaving a vast web of rules, plotting something unknown. He defeated the strange life buying money in front of everyone, and the powerful families must know about it and will definitely take action. For example, this matter has just ended. It just so happened that the aura of a reincarnated heaven appeared, and in the very center of the mortal realm, a place where powerful figures from various dynasties, aristocratic families, and sects gathered. It was hard not to make connections. After all, his identity had already been partially exposed. He was a powerful being in the eyes of all beings who had opened the cycle of reincarnation, and was also suspected of casting the monster heaven into reincarnation, ordering all beings to hunt down the monster heaven. If the aristocratic families had already made contact with a monster heaven, then perhaps this was the bait to lure him in. As for the confidence of the aristocratic families in doing so, it might be due to their bloodline, their hidden resources, or perhaps they had allied with something else. Just like before, the leader of the Sunset Organization who fled in disarray. He dissected his own thoughts, calculating countless possibilities in his mind. The originally chaotic fog gradually dissipated, and everything before him became clear. No matter what the possibility was, he had to be careful and cautious to avoid a mishap. Li Heng was not a fool, nor was he arrogant. He would not underestimate any existence, especially in this world where everyone had cheat codes, and it was practically impossible to survive without them. The ancient sages beside him wore solemn expressions. Most of them had also considered some possibilities, but because they didn't know as much as Li Heng, they couldn't fully reconstruct the whole picture, though they could sense that the matter was quite strange. This is actually a good thing. Going to the center of the mortal realm can also help investigate the aristocratic families and find the whereabouts of that monster-filled heaven. What do you all think? Li Heng looked at the sages beside him and smiled. We will certainly go together. The sages nodded in unison. Even if there were truly problems, so what? They had grown from mere mortals to their current level without fearing any difficulties. To be afraid and hesitate because of some unfounded risk would be true depravity. They wanted to see what the center of the mortal realm was like back then. In their ancient era, spiritual energy and rules were evenly distributed, pervading the mortal realm. While not every place was a celestial abode or a holy land, it was a spiritual land capable of giving birth to talent. The center was merely a directional term, not a place where rules and spiritual energy converged. In their view, the existence of such a transcendent place would hinder the progress of heaven and earth. Once such a place appears, it naturally attracts powerful individuals. However, the resources of heaven and earth are finite. A transcendent place inevitably weakens and impoverishes other areas. In this way, the progress of heaven and earth becomes the progress of individual powerful individuals. Of course, the sages do not deny that the emergence of such transcendent places also brings benefits, such as the gathering of resources and wisdom, allowing for more efficient development. But currently, there are very few void realm experts in the mortal world, indicating that the benefits of transcendent places have not been fully realized. The center of the mortal world, the border area between the territories of various dynasties, is rich in spiritual energy and its rules are clearly manifested. It is a fiercely contested area, but also a neglected territory. Because there is no transcendent force to suppress it, this place is chaotic, and the weak and small forces simply cannot survive there. It can be said that the fall of powerful individuals and the destruction of sects are commonplace. For example, today, a force called the Myriad Swords Pavilion was utterly destroyed. Have you heard? What's gotten into the Yi family, one of the longevity families? They've been destroying sects for days on end. The 10,000 Swords Pavilion, the Dragon Guard Manor, the Zuante sect, all were annihilated in a single blow. I never imagined the Yi family would be so powerful. They've only just arrived in the central region, yet they've already stirred up such a storm, completely disregarding other established forces. Hell, you don't understand. Although there are many branches of the aristocratic families, they all belong to the longevity families, forming the same alliance, sharing the same breath. The Yi family's will is the will of all the longevity families. It's rumored that the Yi family's ancestral home is from the Great Li dynasty, and their bloodline abilities are strange and extremely ruthless. You'd better not discuss this, lest you bring trouble upon yourselves. Hell, I know what the Yi family is doing. They're supposedly looking for something, but I don't know what it is. Anyway, I heard it's quite important. On the top floor of a restaurant, several patrons were drinking and casually eating a few salted roasted peanuts, chatting loudly, much to the annoyance of some more refined customers nearby. So, do you know what it is? Before the leisurely patrons could reprimand them, a young man at the next table couldn't resist his curiosity and asked. The patrons immediately stopped their discussion and turned to look at the next table. A man and a woman. The man was quite handsome, and the woman was also beautiful. One of the patrons raised an eyebrow and said, "Oh, you sound very interested?" The young man immediately nodded. "Actually, I've heard this rumor too, and I've secretly investigated it. If you can provide any useful information, I can repay you with what I know." He thought smugly. No wonder his senior brother often said that these kinds of restaurants were places where information circulated. He had just arrived and already encountered the information he had been investigating about the Yi family. The patrons were stunned again. "You've secretly investigated? May I ask where you're from, young master?" The young man immediately spoke arrogantly. Xiaoxiang Water Pavilion. Upon hearing this, the other patrons on the top floor nodded in agreement. They're actually from Xiaoxiang Water Pavilion. I heard they have a half-step celestial realm expert among them, whose power shakes the three cities. No wonder they dare to investigate the affairs of the longevity clan. Several patrons nodded upon hearing this. Having confirmed with their eyes that these were people they could afford to offend, they immediately stood up, their auras rising instantly. Each of them was a half-step Dharma aspect, coldly watching the man and woman. "Does the young master know that we are from the Yi family?" Upon hearing this, the other guests on the top floor of the restaurant were immediately terrified. They were actually from the powerful Yi family in the central region, rumored to have the support of all the longevity clan, and ruthless killers. How could they appear in such a small city? The young man was also dumbfounded. What was going on? At this moment, an untimely laugh rang out. "Now you know, right? We're fishing." Heng picked up a peanut with his chopsticks and stuffed it into the mouth of the somewhat unconvinced Yan Yao, smiling slightly. Chapter 334 The Protagonist Destined by Heaven. After resolving the strange matter of the life-buying money, Heng took the opportunity to visit Meng Lingayan and the others in Jinhou City. He then guided the little peacock through its second bloodline transformation using the five-color divine light. Afterward, Heng accompanied Yan Yao to the center of the present world. As for the ancient sages, since the 100 Sages Academy was located in the center of the dynasties, which was also considered the center of the present world, they temporarily returned to the academy to handle some matters. It was relatively close, and they could be called upon at any time. "How did you guess?" Tian Yao asked, somewhat unconvinced. Judging from the expression on her face, this goddess of heaven was becoming increasingly personified, possessing the emotions of a living being. "Do I need to guess?" Heng asked in surprise. Tian Yao's expression immediately became confused. Did she need to? It seems that as a living being, you still need to learn more. They so openly discussed the Yi family on the top floor of this restaurant, completely disregarding others. They must have had ulterior motives, like fishing. Heng shook his head and smiled, speaking earnestly. Was he supposed to admit he cheated, that he could sense the disgusting bloodline aura of the Yi family? That wouldn't do. How could he continue his training if he did? Tian Yao listened, stunned, then nodded thoughtfully. "And who are you, sir?" The two's arrogant conversation naturally attracted the attention of the Yi family members. The leader of the Yi family members looked at Li Heng with an unfriendly expression and said coldly. Li Heng frowned upon hearing this. "It seems your Yi family isn't very smart. Did your elders tell you not to meddle in other people's business, and not to show inexplicable hostility towards people of unknown origin and unknown strength?" He shook his head in disappointment. This Yi family was not stable. "Haha, you jest. The longevity families in the central region are all connected, there's no need to be so careful." The Yi family member cupped his hands, replying with a forced smile. However, seemingly mindful of what Li Heng said, he actually held back, turning his head to look at the man and woman from Xiaoxiang Water Pavilion, seemingly not wanting to pay any more attention to Li Heng. The guests nearby were shocked. Could a few words really make the Changsheng family back down? This person either had an extraordinary background or amazing rhetoric. He was no ordinary person, truly extraordinary. It seemed the central region was indeed in turmoil. "Sir, please save me. I have a secret about the Yi family." The man from Xiaoxiang Pavilion finally came to his senses and said in a panic. Investigating the Yi family and provoking the Yi family were two different things. He had already offended the Yi family by saying he was investigating them in front of them. Xiaoxiang Pavilion couldn't protect him anymore, and they might even face annihilation. He had to save himself. Li Heng's few words had made the families wary. Perhaps he could save his life? "How dare you!" The Yi family members were furious. They had only wanted to force this man from Xiaoxiang Pavilion to reveal what information he knew, but now he was even trying to spread information about the Yi family. It was suicidal. "Oh, you know?" Li Heng smiled slightly. "Sir, please don't meddle in other people's business." Hearing Li Heng's words, the Yi family member turned around, his expression ashen, a terrifying aura emanating from his back, and warned. Li Heng ignored him and continued, "Can you bear the consequences?" The man from Xiaoxiang Pavilion was stunned. But at this moment, the other Yi family members had already attacked him, seemingly trying to kill him on the spot. Faced with a life-or-death crisis, he couldn't care less about anything else and hurriedly shouted, "I can bear it." The next moment, these Yi family members, their heads rolled to the ground, their souls annihilated. The entire room fell silent. After a long while, the man from Xiaoxiang Pavilion finally came to his senses, trembling as he looked at everything before him, his finger shaking as he pointed at Li Heng. You killed the aristocratic families, it's all over." He was completely panicked, frantically grabbing his hair. He had thought that Li Heng would intervene to help and block the attacks of these aristocratic families, or drive them away, but he never expected that Li Heng would kill these aristocratic families. Is this man insane? Isn't he afraid of the aristocratic family's revenge? This central area is home to so many powerful families, practically their territory. Even major forces like the Taoist and Buddhist sects wouldn't want to provoke them. And this man dares to kill a member of an aristocratic family on their territory? "I told you, you have to be able to bear the consequences," Li Heng said calmly. "Bullshit. What kind of consequences? He just wants me dead." The man from Xiaoxiang Pavilion roared, ignoring the woman beside him, and hurriedly fled. He had to escape before the aristocratic families could react, the farther the better. Li Heng watched the man's departing figure, his expression calm. Tian Yao put her arm around Li Heng's shoulder, somewhat curious. "Aren't you going to stop him?" Li Heng smiled gently. "You saw it all, why are you asking me?" Tian Yao nodded. She had indeed seen the man's inevitable death, the kind he couldn't escape. If he chose to stay by Li Heng's side, there would be a glimmer of hope, but unfortunately, he was an ignorant man. Then what exactly does he know? Tian Yao looked at Li Heng curiously again. Some interesting clues. For a powerhouse like Li Heng, knowing something doesn't necessarily require someone to speak. A mere thought is enough to access the memories of someone weaker than himself. Therefore, even though the man had escaped, he still knew all of the man's memories. Li Heng glanced at the woman still standing there. "Your senior brother has run away, aren't you going to run?" The woman was startled, then suddenly realized, "Oh, right, I should run." Li Heng was speechless. She was a bit slow on the uptake. "But I don't think I can run," the woman added. "Why?" Li Heng asked curiously. "Because after what happened, even if you escape the central area, you'll be hunted down relentlessly by the powerful families." Without the protection of a strong person, you're doomed no matter what. The woman looked at Li Heng resentfully. That has nothing to do with me. If I hadn't intervened, you and your senior brother would have died here long ago. At least in this situation, you can live a little longer. Li Heng said calmly. Hearing this, the woman immediately became dejected, slumping onto the table. Ah! What should I do then? I'm going to die either way. She murmured to herself, somewhat desperate. I'm curious, why didn't you beg me? Li Heng said. I may be slow-witted, but I'm not stupid. This disaster was caused by my senior brother's big mouth, not by you. You killed the aristocratic families, which actually saved our lives. With such kindness, how could I have the face to ask for more? The woman said calmly. Li Heng smiled upon hearing this. What a clever girl, using retreat as a means of advancement. Fine, since I find you agreeable, you can take this token. If I need anything later, I might come to you again. He tossed down a bronze token, and Li Heng and Bian Yao disappeared, leaving only the other panicked guests and the woman holding the token. In the void, Tian Yao asked curiously. What should we do next? We can manipulate the laws of heaven and earth here, making the rules reject those aristocratic families. If we work hard enough, we can even unleash heavenly punishment to kill them all. The goddess of heaven became increasingly excited as she spoke. Aren't you curious about what I found out? Go find a protagonist of destiny who is being hunted down by aristocratic families. Li Heng replied with a smile. Chapter 335 The Reincarnation of Heaven. The sky was a clear, azure blue. In a dense forest, a young man, stained with blood, lay panting beneath a pine tree, seemingly severely injured. Beside him, a small, furry animal paced back and forth, apparently his pet, concerned for his safety. After a long while, the young man finally caught his breath. He turned to the animal and smiled slightly. Don't worry, I won't die, and I won't hand you over to a powerful family. This is our agreement, and also the contract I made with your parents. He reached out and stroked the animal. The animal nuzzled him affectionately. Seeing this, the young man was filled with emotion, recalling the past, vivid memories flooding back. He had once been a genius of a powerful family, but was betrayed and his bloodline destroyed, earning him the title of a useless person. Later, by chance, he encountered the animal's parents in the mountains. The animal's parents gave him rare and precious treasures, rebuilding his bloodline, allowing his aptitude to return, and enabling him to embark on the path of cultivation once more. Unfortunately, their good fortune didn't last long. That treacherous person learned of this and sent men to hunt him down. The little beast's parents also died in the pursuit, leaving only him and the little beast. Let's go. We need to leave the aristocratic family's territory as soon as possible, otherwise, once they sense our presence, we'll face endless pursuit again. Finally, having recovered some strength, the young man said slowly. HMPH, you think you can escape? Hand over this beast. Suddenly, 5 or 6 figures slowly approached from all sides, causing the young man's expression to change drastically. He quickly picked up the little beast, which emitted a light that interfered with the surrounding laws of heaven and earth. In an instant, the young man and the little beast disappeared again. Damn it, he got away again. Spatial magic. One figure cursed angrily upon seeing this. Upon hearing this, the other figures all looked at him with strange expressions. Aren't you getting a little too into character? Our mission is to force him to run, to unleash the little beast's potential. What, you really think we're the pursuers? Of course I know that. The figure quickly retorted. But don't you want to take this opportunity to beat that kid up? That kid, relying on his pure bloodline, directly got the role of the chosen one, and even became the master of the little beast. I don't believe you're not envious and jealous. Upon hearing this, all the other figures fell silent. Until one figure spoke up quietly. You're dead. Your information is really outdated. Don't you know his identity? That's young Master AG, the grandson of the Great Elder. Do you think an ordinary clansman can get such a role? At this moment, the figure trembled with fear. In the sky, Li Heng and Bian Yao watched all of this. The chosen one, identified as fake. Li Heng said with a light laugh. Tian Yao's eyes were strange. Li Heng, I sensed something unusual about that little beast. It seems to be the reincarnation of heaven, but not quite. It seems to be only a part, or rather, a fragment. The goddess spoke softly. Li Heng nodded, he could also sense the anomaly. The group of pursuers and the young man with the little beast were actually from aristocratic families. This whole scene was just an act, with only the little beast playing a part. As for why these aristocratic families were acting alongside the little beast, that likely involved their schemes and the beast's special nature. It must be said, though, that young man was quite convincing as the chosen one of heaven. He certainly possessed a strong aura of fortune. If it were anyone else, they probably wouldn't have been able to see through the fake chosen one. So what are you going to do? Tian Yao continued to ask. What else can I do? At this level, why bother with roundabout methods? Just bring that aristocratic youth and the little beast over. Li Heng smiled faintly and reached into the void. In an instant, the young man and the little beast appeared there, utterly bewildered. The young man looked around, somewhat confused. What was going on? Was this strange beast's special travel this time so outrageous, directly into the air? Could it be, as his grandfather had predicted, that its bloodline was about to awaken, and he could finally end this charade? Thinking of this, he felt excited. After all, if his grandfather hadn't constantly forced him to participate in this charade, he would still be living a life of luxury at home, not associating with those coarse peasants. Until he saw Li Heng and Tian Yao. You're the ones the family sent to meet me? The young man nodded with satisfaction. Not bad, you two are both quite good looking. After we return to the family, I will remember your great service and won't treat you unfairly. And he stared intently at Li Heng. After you go back, take a good bath. Then, come to my residence tonight. The young man said with a smile. There was a moment of silence after these words. PFFT, ha ha ha. Tian Yao couldn't help but laugh out loud. What are you laughing at? The young man frowned in displeasure. I'm not interested in you, I don't have that kind of taste. He waved his hand, indicating that he didn't want to pay attention to Tian Yao, and continued to look at Li Heng. You can't refuse this matter, otherwise when you return to the family, it won't be a great merit for you, but a great demerit. The young man looked down at him. Li Heng shook his head, somewhat helplessly. He tapped Tian Yao on the head. What are you so happy about, girl? With your beauty, he's not interested in you, what do you think that means? Tian Yao frowned slightly, her expression suddenly becoming dangerous. Li Heng, you're right. She nodded and looked at the young man. Then, die? The words of heaven are ironclad rules, and the law prevails. Instantly, the young man from the aristocratic family died, his soul and true spirit completely shattered, without any room for remembrance, leaving only a memory orb floating in place. Clearly, Tian Yao was quite considerate. At least she knew to leave a memory orb. Li Heng's mind stirred, and he probed the area, seemingly lost in thought. What did you find out? Tian Yao asked curiously. She hadn't probed earlier, nor did she want to probe into the memories of such a person. I learned about some of the aristocratic family's bold actions, Li Heng said with a smile. The aristocratic families and Tian aren't on the same page. The aristocratic families actually want to control Tian. Interesting. Where do they get their confidence? Control that monster? Tian Yao frowned, finding it somewhat unbelievable. Could such a monster really be controlled? The key lies in this little beast. Li Heng looked at the trembling little beast. The little beast, because of its master's death, had become somewhat fearful and angry, letting out roars, seemingly trying to threaten Li Heng into backing down. Tian Yao, you guessed correctly earlier. This little beast is indeed a fragment of Tian, one of the reincarnations of that monster, Tian. Li Heng said, his expression somewhat strange. He hadn't expected the reincarnation of the monster Tian to be in such a miserable state. Chapter 336 Who plays chess when they're serious? Flip the chessboard. The aristocratic families, through some unknown means, did indeed find the reincarnation of the monster of heaven, who had become a strange beast. However, that reincarnation remained dormant and had not awakened. It seems the aristocratic families harbored some wicked intentions, using various methods to cause the monster of heaven's reincarnation to split into many fragments, and the small beast before them was one of those fragments. Their plan was to have each aristocratic family's young talents carry a small beast with them, making them the beast's master, cultivating a bond, and ultimately influencing the monster of heaven through this emotional connection. They wanted to control the monster of heaven in this way. Tian Yao blinked after listening to Li Heng's explanation. Li Heng, you don't actually believe this, do you? Li Heng smiled slightly. Of course I don't believe it. How could a junior from an aristocratic family know everything about something of this level? This would only fool a fool. He had already grasped all the details of the plan through the memory orb left by the aristocratic youth, as if it were openly displayed for everyone to see. However, Li Heng didn't believe it was all fake. What is false can be real, and what is real can be false. A true lie isn't entirely a lie, but rather a mixture of truth and falsehood that ultimately forms a logically plausible fact. Only such a lie can deceive others. Take this little beast before him, for example. It's undoubtedly a fragment of the reincarnated heavenly being. So what are you going to do? Tianyao asked curiously. Clearly, the aristocratic families are deliberately creating a smokescreen, trying to manipulate me, whether targeting me or something else. But they seem to have forgotten one thing: I can directly overturn the table, overturn the chessboard. Li Heng smiled slightly. This was a scheme set up by the aristocratic families. But whether it was a deadly trap or a malicious one, once the chessboard is overturned, everything becomes meaningless. What does it matter what kind of calculations they're making? Who's going to play this game of scheming against each other here? Suddenly, Li Heng's body rose infinitely taller, looking down upon this place of manifest rules and abundant spiritual energy in the center of the mortal realm with a supreme posture, and spoke indifferently. Members of the aristocratic families, come and see me, or die. The voice transformed into waves of sound, sweeping across the surroundings and resounding throughout the central area, causing chaos in the manifest rules and spiritual energy, and shocking many powerful figures. What was going on? It was actually that powerful being who had created the cycle of reincarnation? Why was this powerful being targeting the aristocratic families? Had the aristocratic families offended this powerful being? Many powerful figures were surprised and began to speculate. Some powerful figures who had grudges against the aristocratic families were now gloating. Let your longevity aristocratic families be so arrogant in the central area, now look what's happened. Even this peerless powerful being who created the cycle of reincarnation and suppressed the strange beings who sold their lives for money can't stand it anymore. Aristocratic families, may you die soon. A group of powerful members of the longevity aristocratic families gathered in a secluded place, including the Yu family, Wang family, and others from the great Li dynasty whom Li Heng had previously contacted. Damn it, what's going on? This person has overturned the chessboard. Many powerful members of the aristocratic families were extremely shocked, their expressions grim. They had speculated on many possibilities. But no one expected Li Heng to act like a reckless fool, flipping the chessboard right from the start, completely disregarding any strategy. Was this man really that confident? Did he consider the strength of their aristocratic families, directly opposing them without fear of being caught off guard and suffering a crushing defeat? Their expressions were hostile as they looked at the humanoid silhouette. What do you suggest we do now? The plan has only just begun, but now this guy is refusing to play. How are we supposed to lure him into the heart of the trap? The leader of the Sunset organization was somewhat embarrassed. He had no idea Li Heng would be so arrogant. After all, in his estimation, someone who had grown to this level should be cautious and calculated step by step. Don't rush, don't rush. Don't forget, with my secret technique combined with your aristocratic family bloodlines, we can unleash power surpassing the void realm. Even if the trap isn't successfully set up, we have nothing to fear from this person. The humanoid silhouette forced a smile and reassured the aristocratic families. Then what should we do now? One of the aristocratic family experts asked. You send someone to handle things first. Then, we'll have to persuade that reincarnated being of heaven to help us. The humanoid silhouette spoke softly. Damn it, his plan had been ruined. At this moment, 9 powerful celestial beings from aristocratic families appeared in the sky above the central area. The other powerful figures exclaimed in surprise upon seeing this. They were actually the celestial ancestors of the 9 clans of longevity. It seemed this matter had really escalated. The central area might even explode. Some powerful figures felt their scalps tingle and their hearts pounded. They wanted to make a hasty retreat. But in reality, while they hesitated, some powerful figures had already run away without looking back. May I ask what brings you here, Senior? The 9 celestial ancestors of the aristocratic families bowed respectfully, fulfilling all the proper etiquette so that Li Heng could find no fault with them, and then slowly asked, I ask you, why do your families help this strange creature buy its life? Li Heng asked calmly. The 9 celestial ancestors were extremely astonished upon hearing this. Injustice. Senior, Our aristocratic families have absolutely never done such a thing. It must be a rumor. Some villains are trying to slander our families. Please, Senior, see the truth. They hurriedly denied any wrongdoing. However, Li Heng's words had already stirred up the emotions of many powerful figures in the central area. No wonder that strange life-buying money could weave such a vast web of rules in the mortal world when it appeared. It turned out that aristocratic families were involved, acting as inside agents and traitors. In an instant, they were filled with indignation. The aristocratic families, relying on their so-called high-end bloodlines, had been arrogant for a long time, and now they had even acted as traitors and agents, helping that strange creature in the underworld weave a web of rules? It was utterly disgusting. Li Heng smiled slightly. I don't care if you're right, I care if I'm right. I say you are, and you are. Hearing such domineering words, the faces of the 10 aristocratic family patriarchs immediately darkened. Senior, are you implying that my aristocratic family has no one to rely on? Remember, justice resides in the hearts of the people. Interesting. Justice? Do aristocratic families even have the concept of justice? However, I can give your family a chance. He waved his hand. A huge screen of light appeared above the center, a voting platform with options for innocent family and guilty family. You've said it yourself, justice resides in the hearts of the people. Then let the people of this world judge your family. Listen up, all beings of this world. If you believe your family is guilty, silently recite this word and cast your vote. If you believe your family is innocent, silently recite this word and cast your vote. If the guilty outweighs the innocent, I will personally take action and destroy all aristocratic families in this world. If the innocent outweighs the guilty, then I will temporarily spare your family. By the way, 1 vote per person. Li Heng's voice resounded throughout reality. Upon hearing this, the people of this world erupted in commotion. The 10 aristocratic patriarchs felt a chill in their hearts. Damn it, this was a complete disgrace to their families. If powerful individuals could garner many votes, it wouldn't be so bad. Their families had the resources and ability to win over top experts. But it was 1 person, 1 vote? That meant the vast majority were commoners. Once the voting results were in, the guilty would inevitably outweigh the innocent. They were well aware of this. Look, I'm still cooperating with you to buy time, Li Heng said with a smile. Hearing this, the 10 aristocratic patriarchs felt a chill. At this moment, in a small courtyard shrouded by a grand array of 81 layers, a humanoid figure appeared, looking at a little boy who was boredly playing with a furry beast. The little boy noticed the humanoid figure's appearance and looked up indifferently. Future being, you've appeared again, the humanoid figure said solemnly. Heavens, your enemy has appeared. You must help us. Know that in the future, you will still be our heaven, we stand on the same side. He waved his hand, and a screen of light appeared. The image within it was Li Heng, standing tall above the center, awaiting the arrival of all living beings. At this moment, Li Heng slightly turned his head, looking in their direction. Chapter 337 Heaven makes its move. Not good. The humanoid figure was shocked upon seeing this, and hurriedly waved his hand, trying to close the light barrier. He hadn't expected Li Heng to possess such supernatural powers, he had only observed slightly, yet Li Heng had detected him and was trying to find out where the spy was. The light barrier shattered instantly. Li Heng didn't pursue, and everything was calm. The humanoid figure immediately breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, if this person had detected the location of Yan's reincarnation, everything would have been over. He was wary. Had this person's supernatural powers reached such a level? This place was blocked by a great array with 81 layers, extremely strict both internally and externally. Even Yan's reincarnation, trapped here, couldn't communicate with the external laws to escape. But this person had actually managed to detect him, almost exposing him. It was terrifying. If he wasn't eliminated, the consequences would be endless. Is that the enemy you mentioned? The little boy asked thoughtfully. But his hand was tightly gripping the fur of the furry beast, and hearing the beast's mournful howl, he could tell that it wasn't as calm as it appeared. That's right, he is the enemy who brought you down to the mortal realm. You and he will eventually fight. But now he is too powerful, stronger than any of us, and we need your help. The humanoid silhouette quickly spoke, striking while the iron was hot. I do feel disgust for this person. The little boy replied indifferently. Then you mean? The humanoid silhouette was overjoyed. Finally, he had persuaded this heaven? I can help you kill this person, but after it's over, You must let me leave. At the same time, you must tell me what the future holds." The little boy released his hand, stroking the furry beast, and said emotionlessly. Without the slightest hesitation, the humanoid silhouette immediately spoke. "Deal." Above the center, Li Heng turned around and smiled slightly. Someone had been spying on him just now, and the aura was very familiar. It seemed to be the leader of the Sunset Organization, that humanoid silhouette. This humanoid silhouette was indeed involved with the aristocratic families. At the same time, he also sensed a hidden aura. It seemed to be that monster, heaven? Could it be that the aristocratic families have truly found the reincarnation of the monster heaven? Li Heng pondered for a moment, then looked up at the voting column marked aristocratic families guilty and aristocratic families innocent. At this moment, the guilty vote far outweighed the innocent vote. In percentage terms, at least 90% of the votes were for guilty, while only 10% were for innocent. This was not unexpected for Li Heng. The aristocratic families had committed numerous evils, and their self-proclaimed noble conduct had undoubtedly aroused resentment among many. Now that they had risen to power, it was a case of everyone kicking them while they were down. Moreover, this voting method was merely a matter of silently reciting the vote. There was no fear of being discovered by the aristocratic families, and therefore no risk whatsoever. Thus, the living beings of the mortal world voted even more enthusiastically. Li Heng even suspected that some of the votes for guilty might be from allies of the aristocratic families. The 10 aristocratic family patriarchs looked grim. Although they knew the aristocratic families were unpopular, they hadn't expected them to be this unpopular. Damn it, the 10 patriarchs cursed inwardly. We should have slaughtered those peasants from time to time to establish our authority. They had abandoned all hope and illusion, no longer expecting any good results from this voting screen. Instead, they calmly awaited the activation of their family's methods, ready to fight to the death. In the central region, and even among some beings throughout the mortal world, witnessing the scene, tears of joy streamed down their faces. They knelt on the ground, proclaiming Li Heng as a divine and benevolent ruler. Streams of spiritual power and faith surged from the void. However, Li Heng was too lazy to accept them. He opened a void rift, channeling the spiritual power and faith into the netherworld. His true form cultivated immortality, not the path of gods. This scene made the various gods cultivating the divine path in the far west almost explode with envy. Such terrifying faith power, if they absorbed it, would definitely allow them to ascend to the position of Supreme God King. Now, what else do your families have to say? Li Heng said with a smile. The 10 celestial ancestors' expressions were clouded with gloom. This proves nothing. Truth always stands on the side of the strong. Besides, it's just a voting screen. Li Heng narrowed his eyes upon hearing this. Are you implying I cheated secretly? So what if I did? So what if I didn't? The 10 aristocratic patriarchs sneered. They had just received a message from their respective clans, and their methods were ready to be used. Their attitude immediately hardened, and they no longer gave Li Heng any face. Well said, so what if I did? So what if I didn't? Li Heng smiled, his words surprising them. I'll destroy your clans, it's that simple. As soon as he finished speaking, he pressed down with his palm. Upon seeing this, the 10 aristocratic patriarchs' alarm bells immediately rose, and they roared, hurry up and make your move. As soon as they finished speaking, a loud boom shook the world. A blood-red figure slowly emerged in the aristocratic clan's territory, then grew larger and larger in the wind, like a divine power that could move heaven and earth, and in an instant, it stood in the center, level with Li Heng. The 10 aristocratic patriarchs were overjoyed at the sight and quickly flew to the side of the blood-red figure, looking at Li Heng with cold smiles. This person is doomed now. Did they really think their aristocratic families had no hidden strength? Li Heng narrowed his eyes, a look of amusement on his face. This enormous blood-red figure wasn't a living being. In his sense, it contained the auras of many aristocratic families, seemingly an aggregate formed by the fusion of bloodlines from different families through a secret method. Upon closer inspection, its aura had actually reached the Void Heaven level, even the strongest of the Void Heaven realm, capable of creating its own realm and reaching the half-step Void Deo realm. The people in the center, and even other powerful figures in the mortal world, were shocked. This was the aristocratic family's trump card? It was so terrifying. No wonder the aristocratic families could be scattered throughout the mortal world and so arrogant, with few major forces able to punish them. They possessed such a terrifying trump card. They even felt that this was stronger than that strange life-buying money. In that instant, worry rose in their hearts. You must know that this powerful being who had opened up reincarnation had been at a disadvantage several times when dealing with a strange life buying money, only narrowly winning in the end. And now, facing a trump card from an aristocratic family even stronger than that strange life buying money, could this powerful being still defeat it? If they can't win, wouldn't it mean the aristocratic families will become even more powerful? Some powerful figures are already starting to panic. Some opportunists have even made a snap decision to contact the aristocratic families immediately, wanting to become their loyal dogs. Is that all? You've disappointed me too much? This huge blood-red figure stood between heaven and earth. Under such overwhelming power, even the laws of heaven and earth were distorted, but Li Heng still shook his head in disappointment. Why did he cooperate with the aristocratic families to buy time? Wasn't it to harvest source power? After all, he only had 2 million source power left. But he waited so long to create this half-step void Dao thing? Even if killing this thing would really yield source power, it wouldn't be much? You think that's all? Suddenly, a humanoid figure appeared. He bowed to the void. I respectfully request heaven to intervene. Suddenly, a voice, indifferent but upon closer listening, sounded like a venomous, cold, and twisted voice, corroding all directions and infecting the 8 directions of heaven and earth. I say, you are not accepted by heaven and earth. In an instant, Li Heng sensed it. The laws and rules of the present world were distorting and changing, rejecting him. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 338 Void Dao Realm. Did you feel it? This is the power of heaven. The humanoid silhouette sneered. Li Heng raised an eyebrow. Still disappointing. I could make that monster reincarnate back then, so why would I be afraid of this monster who hasn't even recovered to his peak yet? He shook his head, dismissive. What was the mere rejection of heaven and earth? Back when he was in the underworld, he too suffered the rejection of heaven and earth, but he still slaughtered his way through. How, the laws of heaven and earth are rejecting you, enough to greatly reduce your combat power. Combined with the methods of the aristocratic families, this half-step void Dao realm figure, your fate is already sealed. Why be so arrogant? The humanoid silhouette said even more disdainfully. Of course, that's what he said, but he still valued Li Heng quite a bit, always on guard against Li Heng's movements. This conversation was just a verbal exchange, a battle of wits. Li Heng shook his head, not saying anything more. The aristocratic families, their skills are limited to this. Let's just end it all. He pressed down with his palm, manifesting the 24 heavens, unleashing the might of the heavens. Wherever he passed, the void shattered, creating special turbulence above the center, slamming towards the blood-red figure. The void realm was supreme, so what if he was only half a step into the void Dao realm? As long as he couldn't reach the true void Dao realm, he was no match for him. With his current strength, without needing to borrow source power or use the reincarnation law, the void realm was practically invincible. Facing Li Heng's palm strike, the blood-red figure reacted quickly, manifesting various family-specific divine abilities and talents to protect himself. For example, he could form a Yin Qi demon based on the Yi family's Yin Qi talent, or create a peerless god based on the Wang family's divine Dao talent. Various talents and divine abilities manifested. Not only did he want to block Li Heng's palm strike, but he also wanted to counterattack. Boom! The foundations of the mortal world shook, everything trembled. This was a battle between 2 void realm experts. This blood-red figure was stronger than that strange life-buying money, so the commotion it caused was far greater than the previous one. However, there was no true void realm expert suppressing the mortal realm. Therefore, if it weren't for the heavenly goddess Yanyago secretly stabilizing the entire structure of the mortal realm, this might have been a world-ending war. This analogy is not an exaggeration. The celestial realm is about merging with the Dao of heaven and earth, while the void realm is about creating a virtual self-heaven, stabilizing oneself in the chaotic void, with strength exceeding the boundaries of heaven and earth. Every move of such a powerful being would affect the world. Many powerful figures in the mortal realm were incredibly shocked. Is this what it means to be above the celestial realm? Such terrifying injuries seem capable of destroying the world. Previously, Li Heng's battle with the strange money-buying monster took place in the Forbidden Zone, far from any living being, so they hadn't felt much of it. But now, this great battle taking place in the center truly made them feel the terror of being above the celestial realm, making them feel powerless like ants again. Crack! Something shattered. With a single palm strike from Li Heng, all the talents and supernatural abilities manifested by the Crimson Figure, such as the Yin Qi Demon, the Peerless God, terrifying flames, the Hand of Rules, and indescribable terror, were shattered and destroyed. The palm struck the Crimson Figure solidly, instantly exploding it into countless crimson energy clusters. Not good. The humanoid figure's expression changed drastically. It secretly channeled a secret technique, combining the power of other aristocratic families, desperately trying to draw the crimson energy clusters back together, restoring the Crimson Figure. However, this time, the Crimson Figure's aura was much weaker and more feeble, almost as weak as the strange life-bought money creature Li Heng had previously dealt with. Li Heng raised an eyebrow slightly. Interesting. One palm strike wasn't enough to kill it? It seems the aristocratic family's resources are truly terrifying. If you were to unleash thousands more palm strikes, he would truly be worn down by them. The humanoid figure's expression was grim. He hadn't expected Li Heng to unleash such power even after being rejected by the laws of heaven and earth, almost obliterating the half-step Void Deo blood-red figure with a single slap. What would have happened if he hadn't been rejected by the laws of heaven and earth? Could this person have already reached the Void Deo realm? No, impossible. He didn't have the aura of the Void Deo realm. The humanoid figure forced himself to calm down, but his ears were still filled with the panicked voices of other powerful family members, asking what to do. This blood-red figure was formed by him using a secret technique and the essence blood of powerful family members. The longer the blood-red figure was maintained, the more essence blood was consumed. Just now, in order to reassemble the blood-red figure, most of his essence blood had been consumed, and some powerful family members had already died from exhaustion. But even with such a heavy price, this was still no match for Li Heng. The leader of the Sunset Organization, the humanoid silhouette, was now in a state of utter confusion, completely at a loss. Could such a terrifying being truly be born of this earth? It seems you're still in trouble. At that moment, a detached voice echoed in the humanoid silhouette's mind. The humanoid silhouette was startled. This was Tian? What was going on? Wasn't Tian supposed to be isolated by their 81-layered array? How could it break through the array's protection and contact him? Future being, you need not doubt. But if you want to defeat this person, you must release me. I can help you defeat him. In the courtyard protected by the 81-layered array, the little boy, the reincarnation of Monster Tian, looked up at the sky and spoke. But you haven't recovered to your peak. Without hesitation, the humanoid silhouette quickly replied. You entrust this blood-red figure to me. I still retain a sliver of my power. Using the power of the blood-red figure as a fulcrum, I can briefly recreate the power of Peak Tian, enough to kill this person. Monster Tian coldly replied. Perhaps due to reincarnation, this monstrous heaven became increasingly rational, unlike before when it directly descended into the netherworld to cause trouble for Li Heng, only to be outmaneuvered by him. The humanoid silhouette hesitated for a rare moment. He knew very well what would happen if you released the restrictions on this heaven. If it merely recreated the power of the peak heaven without returning to its supreme position, that would be fine, but if it returned, the world would collapse in an instant. Although he would be happy for this outcome, it was not his plan, nor was it a plan for the future. However, it seemed he had no choice. For the right future. For the inevitable fate of everything falling apart. He had to do this. The humanoid silhouette hardened its heart and used its own tricks to forcibly destroy the 81-layered array set up by the aristocratic families, allowing this heaven to connect with the outside world. Immediately, a terrifying will descended. The will of the monstrous heaven instantly took over the blood-red figure, kicking out the wills of the other aristocratic family experts, and instantly controlling this incredibly terrifying body. Its aura suddenly exploded, surging almost infinitely. Under this terrifying surge of power, all the laws of heaven and earth rose and fell like ocean waves, seemingly kneeling in worship to the Supreme Being, or perhaps trembling in awe of this terrifying force. Finally, the power reached its peak, easily breaking through its limits. The blood-red figure revealed its pair of black eyes, coldly staring at Li Heng. Li Heng narrowed his eyes, an amusement on his face. This seemed to be the heaven of monsters, and even the Void Deo realm? This is troublesome, he said with a smile. Chapter 339 The Heaven of Self. The Void Realm is about constructing one's own personal world. This personal world can be understood as a blank microcosm, filled with no rules. A Void Realm expert merely transcends the world through this blank microcosm. It's like comparing a shell company to a behemoth like Tencent. Regardless of the difference, both can be called companies. One could even shamelessly call themselves the boss of a shell company. But the Void Dao realm is different. The key to the Void Dao lies in the word Dao. This Dao is the rule, the law, used to fill the blank personal world, thus forming a relatively complete microcosm. This relatively complete world is far beyond what a blank world can compare to. It's almost a dimensional reduction attack. Simultaneously, it reflects one's understanding of their personal world's worldview. For example, if a Void Dao realm expert believes the world's model is a square sky and a round earth, then the personal world is a square sky and a round earth. If they believe the world is an endless cosmos, then the personal world will be the vast universe. Even more so, if this expert believes the origin of the world is fire. So, the fundamental source of the self's heaven is also fire, and everything within the self's heaven is an evolution of fire, even water. It can be said that this is not merely borrowing certain material foundations to create heaven and earth, nor is it subject to certain basic rules, such as the origins of earth, wind, water, and fire, the principle of mutual generation and restraint of the 5 elements, the 4 basic forces, etc. Rather, it is creating a world of its own based on its own understanding. Even if this world is temporarily illusory, it is still extremely terrifying. For example, right now, Heng can clearly feel that the surrounding laws and rules have changed and distorted, and he seems to be in a world completely different from reality, slowly being contained within it. He knows that this is the monster's heaven wielding the power of the Void Dao realm, expanding its self's heaven into a small world, temporarily covering the present world, trapping him within it. And this confinement is not merely spatial. This self's heaven is not only preventing him from leaving and returning to the present world, but its laws and rules are also trying to analyze him, explain everything about him, and include him at the level of worldview. Once this process is completed, he would then become a member of this worldview, the self-heaven, and the self-heaven, as the master of this worldview, could manipulate him at will, completely controlling his life and death. In simpler terms, this self-heaven isn't merely a space-time or world, but more like a story, a novel. Once Heng is assimilated into this story, he becomes a character within it, essentially lowering himself to a lower dimension. And that monster heaven, as the master of this story, could easily manipulate a character, and even be arbitrarily modified himself. Heng nodded in admiration. No wonder the celestial being descended, leading him to the Void Dao realm, and then to that so-called true realm, the immortal realm. It was because the Void Dao realm possessed such immense power. The monster heaven remained indifferent. He hadn't yet returned to his heavenly position, he wasn't yet the supreme being who could control the workings of heaven and earth. But soon, once he dealt with this person, he could use the power of this body to make the final leap, returning to his heavenly position. At that time, he would settle accounts with everything. Although he already knew he had been cast into reincarnation by Heng, he didn't harbor much resentment towards Heng. Instead, he felt mostly gratitude, thanking Heng for allowing him to regain his rationality through reincarnation. Although he also felt that so-called rationality was rather meaningless. Only madness, chaos, and ignorance were eternal. But using rationality to defeat an opponent wasn't so bad, was it? In the eyes of the onlookers, Heng didn't move, but stood there blankly, enveloped by the light emitted by the suddenly erupting crimson figure, unable to see that self-realized heaven. After all, whether it was the Void Heaven realm or the Void Dao realm, they were all illusions. Unless one reached above the Void Dao realm, they couldn't truly manifest. Meanwhile, the hearts of many powerful figures in the present world were in their earth roots. They didn't understand what had just happened, but they knew that the crimson figure had regained the upper hand, its aura and cultivation having undergone a terrifying increase. Many felt a chill run down their spines. Would this great being who opened the cycle of reincarnation really be about to be defeated in an unexpected way? They looked at the crimson figure from afar, their hearts filled with trepidation, a feeling of terror rising from their past confrontations with a monstrous heaven. In the shadows, the celestial goddess Yanyago was extremely anxious. She hadn't expected the monster heaven to suddenly appear and almost recreate its peak power. Now, all she could do was contend with the monster heaven for control of the laws of heaven and earth. The self-heaven manifested by the monster heaven was theoretically the power of the complete heaven, not solely belonging to the monster heaven. Tian Yao, as a split pure heaven, was also qualified to wield this power, but because the monster heaven's power was too overwhelming, she could only slightly interfere and try to seize it. In fact, Tian Yao's covert actions did indeed interfere with the monster heaven, causing the worldview of the self-heaven that had trapped Li Heng to waver to some extent. However, the monster heaven immediately locked onto Tian Yao's location. How? Why bother helping this person? My path is the ultimate destiny of heaven and earth, the correct path. And you and I are one, come back. The monster heaven suddenly spoke, reaching out towards Tian Yao's direction, unleashing boundless power, seemingly trying to absorb Tian Yao into its body and merge her back into one. Xianyao's expression changed, and she fought desperately. Although she was still at a disadvantage, the monster heaven had not yet returned to its supreme position, so it was not immediately defeated and could buy some time. HMPH, do you think there is no one in the world? A furious shout rang out from the sky, and 10 figures appeared in the sky above the center, facing the monster heaven from afar. They were none other than the 10 ancient saints. The monster heaven showed a rare change in expression. They were beings from the past? What was going on? Sealing heaven formation, activate. The 10 ancient saints flashed, forming a circle around the monster heaven. Then, using themselves as nodes and their own cultivation and laws as threads, they condensed an unparalleled formation. The monster heaven was trapped inside, its expression indifferent. So what if they were 10 void heaven realm experts? They were ultimately no match for a single blow from a Voideo realm expert. At this moment, the ancient saints felt utterly helpless. This fellow Taoist Li is truly decisive. He started the war without any prior notice, even provoking a monster at the Voideo realm. This is troublesome. Could he have informed them beforehand and discussed things properly? They could have fought the Voideo realm cultivator after setting up their plans, but now that things have happened so suddenly, they haven't had a chance to deploy their strategies. What can they do? They can only stall for time. At this moment, Li, who had overturned the chessboard, tricked his enemy, and betrayed his allies, was unaware of the situation outside. He only felt that things were relatively calm, presumably because the 10 ancient saints had stepped forward. He pondered for a moment, wondering how he should leave. Although he was contained within the self-heaven, his true location was still in the mortal world. He could communicate with the laws of reincarnation and even invoke the power of the reincarnation disk to directly blast open the self-heaven. However, this self-heaven was clearly not just the power of that monster's heaven, but the power of the mortal world itself, condensed from the origin of heaven and earth. The fact that it contained no strange power was enough to prove this. This monster's heaven was just using its strength at will. But if you were to forcefully blast open this realm of self-contained power, the mortal world would likely crumble in half first. This would play right into the monster's hands. He then looked at the source energy required to create the 4 heavens of the colorless realm, the radiant court heaven, the abyss cave heaven, the blossoming heaven, and the beautiful music forbidden heaven. 1 heaven costs 500,000, and 4 heavens cost 2 million. Outrageously expensive, but befitting the name of the colorless realm. If you were to create the 3 pure heavens later, it would only cost more. And it seemed that his remaining 2 million source energy was just enough. Chapter 341 Punch shatters the heaven. Without hesitation, Li Heng made a decisive move. He burned 2 million units of source power, opening up the 4 directions of the celestial dome. The radiant heaven, the profound cave heaven, the exquisite heaven, and the restricted heaven manifested, further advancing Li Heng's 36 heaven system to 28 layers. At this moment, Li Heng directly broke through the boundaries, stepping into the Voideo realm. A terrifying aura erupted, with countless laws of heaven and earth revolving around Li Heng. At this moment, he seemed to be the center of this self-realm, capable of shattering this worldview with a mere gesture. Meanwhile, outside, the monster heaven was about to suppress these ancient saints from the past, devour the split version of itself, completely eliminate interference, and then kill Li Heng. But at this very moment, he also sensed the anomaly in his self-realm. This self-realm, condensed from the origin of heaven and earth and capable of trapping those below the Voideo realm, was actually shaking. It was unbelievable. Could this person truly break free? The monster heaven, filled with doubt and uncertainty, hesitated for a moment, allowing the 10 ancient saints to seize the opportunity. They used the heaven sealing array to intensify their suppression, attempting to force him down to the voidale realm. Sensing the pressure, the monster heaven had no time to think. He roared to the sky, causing the rules of heaven and earth to tremble and even knocking down many of the rules that made up the heaven sealing array, creating a flaw in the array. The 10 ancient saints knew something was wrong. The monster heaven of this era was even more ferocious than those of their time, actually managing to shake the heaven sealing array that they had specially prepared for heaven to restrain the heavens. When would fellow Taoist Li be able to escape? If it was any later, they might be collecting their corpses. Boom! A huge explosion rang out. The monster heaven's attack directly caused the entire heaven sealing array to collapse. The aftershocks of the explosion swept around, creating waves of primordial energy. The spectators from the present world fell silent. Even these 10 terrifying beings, seemingly on par with the great being who opened the cycle of reincarnation, couldn't do anything about it? Was the aristocratic families truly destined to win? Was the world truly beyond saving? However, the aristocratic families claimed innocence and refused to take the blame. This crimson figure was no longer under their control, it had been possessed by a mysterious, eerie, and terrifying will. Some of the top aristocratic family experts even realized that the great array they had painstakingly set up to seal the heavens had been breached, instantly understanding what was happening. They were furious, cursing the humanoid figure for breaking its promise. However, these aristocratic family experts quickly calmed down. Since the heavens had held this person back, they had time to prepare their own methods. The crimson figure was not the aristocratic family's ultimate trump card. The heaven sealing array shattered, and the saints suffered a severe backlash. But the monster heaven didn't have time to deal with the saints, immediately turning its attention to its own heaven, injecting power to reinforce it and prevent Li Heng from escaping and affecting its plans. A soft laugh rang out. "Oh, you're afraid? The mighty heaven. Actually afraid?" With a casual gesture, as if slicing through tofu, Li Heng cleaved through his own heaven, stepping back into reality. He smiled slightly, looking at the monstrous heaven frantically channeling its power. The monstrous heaven was shocked. What was going on? Without his support, this person could only shake the foundations of his own heaven, which could be attributed to the person's extraordinary strength, comparable to voidale realm expert. But now, with this personal support, even a true voidale realm expert trapped inside wouldn't be able to escape for a while. So why did this person escape so quickly? Without time to think, he immediately attacked Li Heng. This blood-red figure didn't belong to him, and it wasn't a permanent construct. If he didn't quickly defeat Li Heng, he would be the one to die when the blood-red figure dissipated. The other powerful figures in the mortal world were invigorated to see Li Heng escape the heavens' suppression. It seemed this great being who opened the cycle of reincarnation was still reliable. Next, by uniting with the 10 other powerful figures of the same level, they had a great chance of victory. They didn't believe Li Heng could face the crimson figure alone. Even a fool could tell that the crimson figure's aura and cultivation were a realm stronger than the powerful being who had opened the cycle of reincarnation and the 10 beings who had trapped it. A difference of even half a realm was already incredibly powerful, let alone a full realm. The so-called hope of victory was merely an optimistic notion. How did you do that? While unleashing his power to suppress Li Heng, Monster Heaven couldn't help but ask in bewilderment. He simply couldn't understand how someone trapped in their own realm of self could escape. It was utterly illogical. Even if this person was a chosen one who had unleashed their full potential, it was impossible. After all, even a chosen one was a level above his own realm. Could this person also possess the luck of the Great Void Realm? Li Heng didn't answer, instead throwing a punch that collided with Monster Heaven. He didn't need to waste words with a monster destined to die. He didn't want to add a death by talking too much buff to his list. Now that Monster Heaven hadn't regained its heavenly position, it meant it could be killed. Killing Monster Heaven in this state wouldn't have any negative impact on the world. On the contrary, it would benefit it, eliminating a malignant tumor and even allowing him to harvest source energy. A double benefit. Monster Heaven, imbued with the might of heaven and earth, carrying that almost omnipresent, corrupting and eroding power, met Li Heng's seemingly effortless punch. The moment they collided, the surrounding space collapsed first. The mortal world simply couldn't withstand this level of collision. The surrounding space-time was the first to perish, returning to the empty, chaotic state of the Great Void. Monster Heaven was delighted. He welcomed this collision. After all, he was currently at the Voidale realm, while even if Li Heng had strangely escaped the realm of his own heaven, it was impossible for him to suddenly advance to the Void Dao realm. Therefore, he was confident he could kill Li Heng directly in this collision. Although he was also puzzled as to why Li Heng had lost his mind and dared to clash with him at the Void Dao realm. The urgency of the situation left him no time to think about such things. He had to seize the opportunity and resolve the variable. And so, with a crack, Monster Heaven exploded. In Li Heng's punch, imbued with the Dao of Earth and the Great Sun, the crimson figure, embodying the bloodlines of numerous aristocratic families, exploded once more, this time leaving not even a crimson aura. Li Heng withdrew his fist, his body shrouded in emptiness, his expression calm. Nothing much happened. Because all of this occurred in the empty void, merely a collision of their power and the Dao, nothing else disrupted or altered their destiny. No unexpected events occurred. The notification of source power arriving appeared in Li Heng's mind. Source power plus 10 million. A huge profit. This aligned with Li Heng's prediction. A celestial realm guaranteed at least 100,000, a void heaven realm guaranteed at least 1 million, and a void Dao realm guaranteed at least 10 million. But judging from this amount, the monster occupying the crimson figure, the celestial realm, was the weakest void Dao realm, nothing to be proud of. At this moment, the world fell silent. What had just happened? Almost everyone was bewildered. Restoring the world from its shattered void to its original state, Li Heng turned his gaze to the area inhabited by the aristocratic families. With his void Dao realm eyesight, he quickly discerned what they were up to. They were setting up an array, seemingly summoning something. Some powerful figures were chanting incantations, such as great ancestors. But interestingly, the aura emanating from this array wasn't the ancient simplicity of the past, but rather a new life from the future, ethereal, elusive, and ever-changing. Moreover, it contained a hint of the eerie. Chapter 341: A Terrifying Future. Within the ruined cavern left behind by the Heavenly Mandate Organization, Zhuang Xianji's fragmented, illusory form stood in the void, his gaze fixed on the center of the present world, his expression complex. This aura of the future had finally reappeared. He had sensed this aura 3 times before. The first time, it caused no significant disturbance in the present world, yet the Sunset Organization inexplicably appeared. The second time, it led to the emergence of powerful families, altering the current world order. And the third time, he sensed a change in the situation, the reborn individual. He sighed inwardly. He had invested in that variable, the reborn individual, but now this variable was utterly useless, his strength, potential, everything about him completely outclassed by this Li Zheshi, fellow Taoist Li. Not to mention his current state, even at his peak, he wouldn't have been a match for this fellow Taoist Li. If he had known this would happen, he should have taken the gamble and invested in this fellow Taoist Li. So now, should he abandon his original plan? The future, oh the future, he murmured to himself. As someone who cultivates the path of heavenly secrets, dealing with a long river of time, he could vaguely glimpse a corner of the future, a world destined for decline, yet also a despairing spectacle of grand revelry. If this predetermined future wasn't resolved, even if this fellow Taoist Li advanced further, it would be futile. But the problem was that the future was ethereal, with infinite possibilities. This predetermined future was hidden within these many possibilities, making it difficult to even find, let alone resolve. Unless. He pondered deeply, then quickly sighed. Fine, let me get this old bone moving again. At the center, Li Heng noticed the aristocratic family's actions but didn't immediately act. He was also curious about what the aristocratic families would summon in this way. Were their ancestors not from the past, but from the future? That would be truly intriguing. This seemed to explain the words of the ancient sages. There were no aristocratic families in ancient times. Yet, they suddenly appeared. Did the origins of these aristocratic families come from the future? Was the future projected back to the past? Li Heng couldn't help but recall what the celestial figure had said, this world has a future destined to decline, destined to despair. Because this future has become destiny, even if it hasn't happened yet, it's already a foregone conclusion, no longer ethereal. The future has the power to interfere, now and in the past. The emergence of the aristocratic families, even the Sunset Organization, and even that future reborn individual, are all the work of something from the future? Judging from the current situation, the aristocratic families and the Sunset Organization are not beneficial to the world, their existence will only further worsen the world, leading the future into an unfathomable abyss. As for that future reborn individual, he currently poses neither harm nor benefit. Perhaps two factions are involved in this? Li Heng pondered silently, the fog in his mind gradually dissipating. He roughly understood why the future would interfere with the past. Now, it's simply to ensure the destined future proceeds smoothly, resolving some variables that hinder it, such as himself. After all, the future is just the future. If it's not destined, it's just an illusion. Which is equivalent to everything in that future era becoming false. How could those future beings tolerate that? Moreover, he also suspected it was related to calamities and pollution. The thought sent a chill down Li Heng's spine. His past had been corrupted and succumbed, his future already sealed. Only a faint glimmer of hope remained. What kind of hellish world was this? No wonder that celestial figure was so eager to give up. If he didn't have a cheat code, he would have given up too, simply running away. In fact, the aristocratic families were somewhat dumbfounded. It wasn't that the summoning ritual was going poorly, everything had gone smoothly. However, before they could even complete the ritual, the crimson figure that had been suppressing Li Heng had been utterly defeated. This was unacceptable. This peerless, ruthless figure would definitely take advantage of their weakened state while they were performing the summoning ritual, not giving them a chance to summon their ancestors. Many powerful figures had already given up hope. But they waited a long time. They didn't see Li Heng make a move, they remained unharmed. They were stunned. Had that peerless, ruthless figure not noticed? That was impossible. Unless. Suddenly, a possibility occurred to them. They faintly sensed Li Heng's gaze, and a feeling of grief and indignation instantly rose within them, as if they were monkeys trapped under a mountain. This peerless fiend completely disregarded them. Knowing they were conducting a summoning ritual, he let them proceed, treating them like ants. Did he really think he had victory in the bag? The many powerful figures exchanged bewildered glances. What should they do? Ultimately, however, they chose to continue the summoning. This was their last hope for a comeback, and they felt their chances of winning were high. This fiend had no idea of the terror of their ancestors. At this moment, the other powerful figures in the present world finally recovered from the aftershock of Li Heng's punch that shattered the blood-red figure. They gasped in shock, unable to comprehend what was happening. If they weren't mistaken, this fiend was a realm lower than the blood-red figure before. Why, after escaping suppression, could he shatter the blood-red figure with a single punch? Was this reasonable? The 10 ancient saints also looked at Li Heng with the eyes of someone looking at a monster. They suddenly felt that their journey to this era had been in vain. Sensing the saints' gazes, Li Heng smiled and said, "Just an occasional breakthrough. No need to be surprised." The saints nodded numbly. "What do you mean by occasional breakthroughs? Reaching their level, taking another step forward is incredibly difficult. You're telling me it's an occasional breakthrough? This should be called a meteoric rise, a direct breakthrough over a whole realm. Fellow Taoist Li, what these aristocratic families are doing is very dangerous." At this moment, Kong Sheng, the leader, took a deep breath and warned him. Li Heng nodded. "I know that. They're probably summoning beings from the future, and the future is uncertain, with infinite possibilities. It's possible that someone stronger than me could suddenly appear." "Then why?" Before Kong Sheng could finish the sentence, "I won't intervene," Li Heng interrupted him again. It's all right. I have a plan, a way to deal with it." He smiled slightly. Was he going to say it was because he had 10 million units of origin power? It wasn't that he couldn't say it, but there was no need. After all, even the immortals at the creation realm level didn't know what origin power was, let alone the ancient saints of the void heaven realm. The future should be ethereal and unreal. Yet this aura feels so real to me, how strange. Han Sheng of the legalist school frowned. Li Heng shook his head. "You all are unaware that this is because the future is already predetermined, thus it has become real in the unseen realm, able to truly and undeniably interfere with the present and the past from the future." He revealed the despairing truth of this world. The ancient sages were shocked upon hearing this and fell silent. They had considered this possibility, but it was ultimately just a thought. But now it had been confirmed. What kind of terrifying calamity was this? At this moment, the winds and clouds in the world suddenly changed. The river of time, which was originally ethereal and flowed between all things in the world, actually manifested in reality. At the downstream end of that river, a black sliver appeared. A murmuring, writhing sound came from the black end. "They're all useless, eh, the Venerable One?" must take action across eras. The indifferent voice transcended the river of time, resounding throughout the present world. Chapter 342 The Method of Locking the Future. The expressions of the 10 ancient saints changed drastically. This person possesses the ability to act across eras? They were astonished. This was utterly unbelievable. Heng narrowed his eyes and calmly spoke. That's not necessarily true. Being able to speak across eras doesn't equate to being able to act across eras, and even if one could act across eras, it doesn't necessarily prove they possess that power. If the person speaking truly possessed that power, then that immortal figure would have already appeared. The summoning array constructed by the aristocratic families began to glow, a terrifying black light erupting, spreading across tens of thousands of miles, like a bizarre descent. At this moment, 10 powerful celestial beings from the aristocratic families sacrificed their lives, merging into the summoning array, instantly causing a terrifying aura to rise. This summoning array seemed to be an anchor point, a coordinate. After such a display of power, a terrifying figure faintly emerged from the blackness at the end of the river of time. Guided by the summoning array, this figure actually crossed the distance of the river of time, slowly manifesting in the present world, manifesting in this era. Heng chuckled softly. This aura was indeed interesting. It seemed to be above the Voidale realm, yet its strength was limited. This terrifying figure finally manifested successfully, truly descending upon this era. The figure swept across, seemingly piercing through everything in heaven and earth, quickly locking onto Heng. You are that variable, that flawed existence? Then die. The terrifying figure spoke calmly, its palm, as vast as the heavens, pressing down on Heng. Within its palm, a mysterious world faintly manifested, filled with writhing, distorted, and ominous forces. All the powerful beings in the present world were shocked. One wave subsided, another rose. Now, such a terrifying being had descended. Could today be the day of the present world's demise? At this moment, they didn't even think that Heng and the 10 ancient saints could withstand such a terrifying being. There was no need to even consider it. Because upon seeing this being, they knew it was invincible. At this moment, Xiao Hao, who had been drinking himself into a stupor in a certain tavern, also sobered up, looking at everything that was happening in the present world with shock, his expression somewhat confused and bewildered. What was going on? This figure, this being. Shouldn't it appear in the future? It should still be born now. It's over, it's all over. He muttered frantically, pacing around the table, even accidentally knocking over a wine jar, shattering it on the floor, soaking half his clothes, but he didn't care. Because he knew that the world was about to face annihilation. At this point in time, there was simply no powerful being capable of dealing with this terrifying being. This terrifying being was not from the human race. Facing this palm strike, Heng had a premonition. He would die. This premonition wasn't due to some immense power that he couldn't withstand, but rather a sense of destiny that his death was already predetermined. No matter what choice he made, he would perish under this palm strike. Therefore, Heng didn't resist, letting the palm strike press down. To others, this would be suicide, seeking death, giving up, but he had his own considerations. He had used the mysterious jade slip to comprehend a divine power that could manifest the illusory image of the river of time, but he still didn't know how to use it properly. He now had a vague sense that he could use the impending danger of the future lock to gain a deeper understanding and thus acquire the method of application. In any case, even if he encountered unexpected danger, millions of source energy would be enough to ensure his safety. This seemingly inevitable predicament had become a great opportunity for him. The speed and power of this palm strike exceeded the imagination of all the powerful beings in the world. Before any of the spectators could react, Heng had already been struck by this palm. At this moment, Heng sensed that he had entered a strange state. His perspective began to rise, slowly exceeding the boundaries of heaven and earth, until he saw a river and stopped. This river was the river of time. However, this did not seem to be the real river of time, but rather a phantom of the river of time that he had comprehended using the jade slip of salvation. Moreover, the river he could see had no past or present parts, only the ethereal future, with many branching paths. And when he looked closely, he discovered that this future was not the future of heaven and earth, but his own future. However, his future was all crumbling and corrupting. For example, there was one future. He unleashed his great power, fighting with all his might against a terrifying figure, managing to fight it to draw. But the next moment, a murmur echoed, and he instantly transformed into a monster. Another future unfolded. He borrowed the power of the cycle of reincarnation, even the core of the cycle, the reincarnation disk, to suppress the terrifying figure. But the next moment, a black shadow from the end of the river of time attacked him, and he exploded. Even worse, his prolonged entanglement with the terrifying figure caused severe damage to the mortal realm. The celestial figure above the great sun was forced to descend, seemingly wanting to end the war. But the next moment, from the black shadow at the end of the river of time, a writhing, rotting, and crazed form emerged, traversing the river of time to see the present. The entire mortal realm was directly distorted and ravaged, and he too instantly became a monster, the celestial figure shattering along with it. In all these futures he saw, there was no good ending, destined for either death or monsterization. Moreover, he had a premonition that once all his futures were shattered and corrupted, his true self would truly die. Interestingly, none of the futures he saw involved his use of source power. It was as if source power didn't exist. Did this signify something? Heng roughly understood what this method was. It was using mysterious power, taking advantage of this inexplicable calamity, to shatter all his futures through a future-locking mechanism, thus sealing his fate. The terrifying figure wasn't using its own power either. However, this method was indeed profound. So, it belonged to him. Heng smiled slightly, a thought flashing through his mind, as if he had gained some insight. His perspective shifted upwards, as if transcending time, allowing him to see the shattering and corruption of his various futures. This was precisely because of this divine ability, this illusory image of the river of time. After all, with his level of cultivation, transcending time was still a long way off. He could only see this situation because he was reflected in the illusory image of the river of time. The illusory image of the river of time reflected the crisis he encountered, and also the mechanism of this future-locking method, which he had already largely grasped. At most, he couldn't activate the mysterious power to destroy the future. But that wasn't important. In this method, the mysterious power was merely a tool to destroy others' futures. If he were to use this method to destroy others' futures, he would definitely need to use a different tool, a different power. Having understood all this, Heng didn't intend to waste any more time. He should deal with this terrifying figure as soon as possible to avoid any trouble later. But at this moment, he heard a sigh echoing in the river of time. Even fellow Taoist Li can't handle this kind of method? Alice, this old bone of mine still has to fight with my life. This seemed to be the voice of Zhuan Xianji, that old man from the Destiny organization. Heng was slightly surprised, and then a sense of foreboding arose in his heart. What did this old man want to do? Who said he couldn't handle it? Don't be fooled by his futures being destroyed one after another. That's only because the future is illusory, ethereal, and fragile, offering no resistance to that mysterious power and inexplicable calamity. But in the real present, things might be different. Take that celestial figure, for example. He didn't believe that celestial figure was so weak in the real present that it would explode at the mere glance of a future monster. Heng quickly escaped his current state. He didn't want this old man to interfere with his affairs. Chapter 343 Taking Action in the Past. Under the terrifying figure's palm strike, Heng vanished. Only then did the ancient saints and other powerful figures react, their eyes widening in disbelief. What happened? What just occurred? The 10 ancient saints were utterly bewildered. Although they could clearly sense that this terrifying figure was a whole realm stronger than them, it was definitely on par with that fellow Taoist Li, perhaps only slightly stronger. Since it was only slightly stronger, the difference shouldn't have been so overwhelming. Fellow Taoist Li was gone, his fortunes reversed. What happened to your trump card? They couldn't sense any of Heng's aura at all. It was as if he had truly been killed and vanished by that single palm strike. They looked at each other, completely dumbfounded. Compared to the 10 ancient saints, the other contemporary powerhouses were filled with more panic. Indeed, even the great being who created reincarnation couldn't withstand this terrifying figure's palm strike, let alone them. It seemed the day of destruction for the contemporary world was approaching. Everything was doomed. Even a blind man could see that the terrifying figure was an enemy, not a friend. Of course, some with an extremely strong will to survive desperately contacted aristocratic families, hoping to use their connections to escape and save their lives. The aristocratic families, on the other hand, were overjoyed. Their ancestor was indeed invincible, he could even kill that vicious man with a single slap. From now on, no one would dare challenge their family's authority. Even super-powerful forces like the Taoist and Buddhist sects would be subordinate to them. The aristocratic families would ultimately reign supreme in this world. The monks and Taoists who were with Xiao Hao had complex expressions. Was it all over? Was it really over? Even layman Li couldn't withstand that slap. But then, the monks and Taoists remembered Li Heng's unfathomable depths and various methods, and a faint hope still rose in their hearts. Perhaps layman Li wasn't dead? Haha, everything is over, everything is over. Master, you have no idea how terrifying this being is. Xiao Hao drank wine, surrounded by spilled wine and broken wine jars. His expression was manic, a mixture of crying and laughing, completely devoid of the carefree demeanor of a young master from an aristocratic family. The terrifying figure withdrew its hand, then looked at the 10 ancient saints. The aura of the past doesn't belong to this era. Interesting, you are the ancient saints recorded in the scriptures? But now you seem to be nothing more than the remnants of the dead, chased by calamity. Oh well, the grand celebration is ultimately not for you remnants. Go and accompany that variable. The figure's voice was indifferent, yet carried a chilling killing intent. It then raised its hand, pressing down on the 10 ancient saints. It had paid a heavy price for its transaction and had to quickly resolve all unstable factors, otherwise, if its old rivals noticed, it would be at a disadvantage. At this moment, a sigh resounded, echoing throughout the mortal world. In the end, it still makes this old bone of mine move. The terrifying figure's movements remained unchanged, its palm continuing to press down, but it was merely a void realm cultivator, not worth worrying about. But since it had jumped out, it would just crush it later. Until a figure appeared in the river of time. This figure was very strong, a void realm cultivator. However, faced with this terrifying figure projected from the future, they were still powerless. The hope that had just risen in the hearts of some powerful individuals was instantly extinguished, replaced by disappointment. But at this very moment, in every point in time along the river of the future extended from this figure, an identical figure appeared, seemingly equivalent to him at each point in time. However, these figures became increasingly illusory the further into the future they extended. The terrifying figure was somewhat surprised at this moment, and he spoke. Interesting method, but since you have already died in the past, you should just be a dead man and not interfere in the affairs of the present and future. Or do you want to die completely? His words carried a chilling killing intent, pressing down on the figure. At this moment, the faces of these figures were no longer blurred. Many powerful individuals in the present world were shocked to see this scene, because they had recognized the figure's identity as the mysterious and unpredictable leader of the Heavenly Destiny Organization, Zhuan Xianji. But why did the terrifying figure say Zhuan Xianji was dead? The powerful figures were taken aback, suddenly recalling the disappearance of the Heavenly Mandate Organization. Could it be that Zhuan Xianji's death caused their disappearance? But if Zhuan Xianji was dead, why did he reappear now? Wait? They gasped, realizing a possibility. Could it be that Zhuan Xianji acted from the past, from a point in time when he was still alive, and through some method, allowed his power to transcend the river of time and affect the present? This would explain why Zhuan Xianji's figures became increasingly illusory as they extended into the future. Because Zhuan Xianji had died in the past, he had no foundation in the present or future. Some of the present-day powerful figures felt a chill of fear. Back then, their Heavenly Mandate Organization hadn't been so polite, even disdaining Zhuan Xianji's secretive behavior. But now, it seemed Zhuan Xianji was terrifyingly strong, having transcended the celestial realm and reached the void realm, even capable of transcending time to a certain extent. Although it didn't seem to help the current situation. Fellow Taoist, you jest. Your foundation lies in the future, you are merely a phantom projection now. How are you any different from me? Zhuan Xianji said calmly. How, old man, you truly don't understand destiny. The terrifying figure sneered. The future is already predetermined, no longer ethereal, but real. You, a ghost who died in the past, dare to talk to me about foundation? Besides, you are merely at the void heaven realm, while I am at the void Dao realm. Even if neither of us has a foundation, you are still no match for me. Zhuan Xianji laughed upon hearing this. This old man doesn't need to be able to defeat you. Upon hearing this, the terrifying figure immediately sensed something was wrong. He withdrew his hand, which was about to suppress the 10 ancient saints, and unleashed a strange power, intending to kill Zhuan Xianji instantly. However, it was too late. Zhuan Xianji's expression turned solemn. "The past is the past, the future is the future," he declared loudly. Instantly, all the figures spontaneously combusted, transforming into torches and unleashing invisible power fluctuations that washed over the river of time, disrupting its stability and causing it to flicker. Along with this, a terrifying figure also appeared and disappeared, seemingly vanishing at any moment. "How dare you!" the terrifying figure roared, its speed increasing dramatically as it charged towards Zhuan Xianji. The river of time was the key to his intervention from the future, allowing him to transcend time. If it disappeared, he would lose his communication channel with the power of the future, and his projection would vanish completely. The 10 ancient saints were solemn. They understood what was happening. Just moments before, they had been wondering why Zhuan Xianji was acting this way, since neither the Void Heaven Realm nor the Void Dao Realm had the authority to interfere with the river of time and cause chaos. But now it seemed that while this river of time was indeed the true river of time, this terrifying figure had used some method to manifest it. Therefore, if one were to slightly influence or disrupt the stability of this method, the river of time could be forced to disappear again, returning to the myriad things of heaven and earth. In this way, the terrifying figure would lose its foundation. "Fellow Taoist, we're here to help you," the 10 ancient saints roared, unleashing their divine powers to assist Zhuan Xianji in interfering with the river of time, allowing it to return to the myriad things of heaven and earth. "Get back to the future." Zhuan Xianji also became excited, his clone enveloped in flames, burning with his essence and spirit, his aura reaching its peak. He joined forces with the 10 ancient saints, attempting to force the terrifying figure back to the future. The terrifying figure was furious. "You're courting death." He hadn't expected these beings to be so shameless, cutting off his retreat when they couldn't defeat him head-on. He roared. Suddenly, a pair of eyes emerged from the blackness at the end of the river of time, their gaze fixed on the present moment, instantly freezing heaven and earth. Zhuan Xianji and the 10 ancient saints froze. This wasn't time standing still, but rather a suppression of heaven and earth by a high-level pressure, halting the operation of the universe and limiting all living beings to mere thought. However, those eyes seemed to have paid a heavy price, shedding shocking tears of blood, even becoming stained with the touch of black. The terrifying figure breathed heavily, swallowing endless yin and baleful energy, then grinned as it looked at the present world, and at Zhuan Xianji and the 10 ancient saints who were now immobilized. He laughed loudly. "Before absolute power, all your petty tricks are futile. Did you really think I could only project a phantom image? Die?" He struck down with a palm, intending to obliterate Zhuan Xianji and the 10 ancient saints. At this moment, a foot stepped out from the void. Li Heng broke free of that state and returned to the present world. Tisk. He looked at everything frozen in the world and couldn't help but shake his head. What the hell? How long had he been gone? Wait, you're not dead. The terrifying figure, who thought victory was assured, was incredulous to see Li Heng sacrifice himself again. "Are you surprised I am not dead?" Li Heng said with a smile. "If you're not dead, then I'll let you die again." The terrifying figure roared, unleashing another palm strike, still locking onto Li Heng's future, condemning him to death. Li Heng shook his head. Just this one move? He slightly extended his fist, also locking onto the future, destined to kill the terrifying figure in return, and instantly clashed with the terrifying figure's palm strike. Then, the terrifying figure exploded. As the figure exploded, at the end of the river of time, in that black area, a writhing, murmuring, decaying body appeared, emitting a loud wail. Li Heng calmly withdrew his fist and snapped his fingers. Heaven and earth resumed their cycle, everything returned to normal. He raised an eyebrow at the still-burning Zhuan Xianji. "What, you old man, want to commit suicide?" Chapter 344 Space-Time Coordinates. The 10 ancient sages and Zhuan Xianji were stunned. They had thought everything was beyond saving, that reality was destined to crumble, when Li Heng, who they believed had failed and was already dead, suddenly reappeared. And then, with a single punch, he blasted that terrifying figure to pieces. What was this? They were somewhat bewildered. "What, are you surprised I'm still alive?" Li Heng raised an eyebrow slightly. They exchanged glances, then nodded blankly. Yes, they were indeed very surprised. They were even a little frantic. Especially Zhuan Xianji. If he weren't also near death, he would have even contemplated suicide. If he had known Li Heng was so powerful, he wouldn't have jumped out. He had exhausted all his energy and spirit, burning his own special traces, trying to fight for a last glimmer of hope with his life, only to fail in the end. Failure was failure, at least he had tried, and he had done his last bit of effort to protect the present world. His life hadn't been in vain. But now? Li Heng suddenly appeared, effortlessly resolving the crisis he couldn't overcome even with a single punch, restoring peace to the world and averting its impending doom. He couldn't say this was bad. In fact, he was grateful to Li Heng. After all, if Li Heng hadn't intervened at the last moment, the world would have surely fallen, and once fallen, all hope would be lost. But, if that's the case, why didn't you act sooner, sir? Zhuan Xianji was so frustrated he felt like he was spitting blood, his mind so clouded that he even called Li Heng old man. He now felt that his desperate act of jumping out was completely meaningless, a pointless sacrifice. Now look what happened. His essence, spirit, and traces of time and space were completely burned. He had no choice but to die. Alright, don't be surprised. Seeing the silence between them, Li Heng shook his head, turning his main gaze back to Zhuan Xianji. Speak, old man, what are you trying to do? Burning yourself, are you planning to commit suicide? Zhuan Xianji had no strength to answer, nodding blankly. Anyway, he was going to die anyway. You really want to commit suicide? If you really want to, I won't stop you. Li Heng said with a subtle smile. No need for layman Li to stop me. Zhuan Xianji snorted coldly. This layman Li was too much of a chatterbox. Although Li Heng's cultivation level was higher than his now, and he should theoretically show some respect, he couldn't be bothered with such things when he thought about dying. It was a case of a dying man's words becoming less kind. Of course, he didn't resent Li Heng. After all, he was the one who stupidly jumped out. However, after thinking for a moment, he felt he had to explain something, so he softened his tone and spoke like an old man halfway to the grave. I have some things to tell you. Then hurry up and say it, lest you die before you finish and leave us hanging. Li Heng waved his hand, urging him mercilessly. Zhuan Xianji fell into a brief silence. But he felt like his lungs were about to explode with anger. He wondered if he shouldn't have said so much. Sigh, never mind, for the sake of all living beings. He casually made up an excuse to ignore Li Heng's words, sighed inwardly, and continued, that terrifying figure comes from the future. I cultivate the way of heavenly secrets and have glimpsed a corner of the future. It is a future destined for despair, but for that terrifying figure. For those things already infected and mutated, it is a grand celebration. If things continue to develop in that future, then all things and beings in the present world, while not completely extinct, will slowly be infected in order to adapt to the world, becoming entirely new species, new monsters, completely marked with that power. This kind of future is even more terrifying than pure destruction. Therefore, don't expect those new species and races to be of the same mind as all things and beings in the present world, even if their forms are normal, like humans. Zhuan Xianji's words had a strange infectiousness, making those who listened seem to truly witness that crazy, bizarre, and desperate future, and empathize with it. Old man, get to the point, what should we do? Li Heng said calmly, utterly ruthless. Zhuan Xianji's heart twitched. He pretended not to hear and continued. To avoid that future, we must destroy it. However, as you all know, the future is uncertain, with infinite possibilities. Unless we can obtain accurate space-time coordinates, we simply cannot pinpoint that hopeless future. Without pinpointing it, we can't talk about destruction or change. So you have coordinates? Confucius, the leader among the sages, spoke up. He had to speak. If Li Heng interrupted again, he seriously suspected that this junior, who had burned everything to protect the present world, would be driven to madness by Li Heng. Although he was about to leave, he couldn't just leave like this. It would be an insult to his refinement. I don't have coordinates, but when I fought that terrifying figure just now, I caught a wisp of his aura. Perhaps I can use that aura to pinpoint the space-time coordinates of that future. Zhuan Xianji stretched out his palm, in which a wisp of yin energy swirled. This wisp of yin energy seemed to possess sentience, constantly darting about, seemingly trying to escape the range of Zhuan Xianji's palm, but it was bounced back as soon as it approached the edge of his palm. It was like a monkey in the palm of Buddha. Li Heng nodded thoughtfully. This is quite interesting, he commented. Because he discovered that after so much time, he still hadn't received the notification of the source energy arriving in his mind, which was clearly because the true form of that terrifying figure hadn't perished. Even though he had just beaten that true form to pulp, it seemed these things were truly difficult to kill. He might really have to go to that future to completely end this so-called predetermined, locked future. Anyway, as long as he found the accurate space-time coordinates, it wouldn't be too difficult. A future full of monsters, full of all sorts of strange things. That would be an excellent hunting ground, overflowing with source energy. Li Heng immediately became interested. He also thought of the future reborn person he had encountered before. Perhaps he could use the wisp of aura in Zhuan Xianji's hand, and then use that future reborn person as a guide, to break through the fog of the infinite future, obtain the accurate space-time coordinates, and arrive in the future. The monsters of the future dared to kill into the present. So it would be reasonable for him to kill into the future now, right? You're very good. Connecting everything, Li Heng nodded in satisfaction, feeling that the plan was feasible, and then patted Zhuan Xianji on the shoulder, expressing his satisfaction. Give it to me. Li Heng waved his hand, snatching the aura from Zhuan Xianji's palm. Immediately, with a thought, he scanned the mortal world with his divine sense, quickly locking onto the information of the future reborn, Xiao Hao. Without further delay, he stepped into the void, intending to have a chat with this young master of a noble family. He left behind only these words, "The rest is up to you. Clean up the noble families thoroughly. Oh, right, there are a few people you don't need to deal with. Although they are from noble families, they are still my relatives and friends." Seeing Li Heng's rudeness, not only snatching the aura from his hand, but also leaving him with such a long speech, Zhuan Xianji was instantly enraged. He didn't care anymore, he was going to die anyway. He immediately began cursing Li Heng. After cursing him 99 times, he finally felt better, turned to the 10 ancient saints, and began to give his final instructions. From now on, I will have to rely on you all. As for fellow Taoist Li, I have no resentment towards him. Ultimately, it was my own doing. Fellow Taoist Li's attitude just now was probably because he resented my aggressive and decisive actions, which resulted in unnecessary casualties before he could even make a move. Zhuan Xianji shook his head, sighing with disappointment. Suddenly, he realized something was wrong. So much time had passed, and he had cursed 99 times 81 times, why hadn't he been burned to ashes? Zhuan Xianji looked at the ancient saints. Seeing their strange gazes, he subconsciously looked at his own body and froze. Wait, where did the flames go? He was dumbfounded. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 345: The End of a Powerful Family. I think fellow Taoist Li probably heard all the things you said earlier. I think you should apologize to him. You should know his personality, Confucius said with a strange expression. The other sages nodded vigorously, agreeing with Confucius. They were extremely surprised. The reason Zhuan Xianji was still alive, even with the flames on his body gone, was undoubtedly because fellow Taoist Li had intervened and saved his life. This was simply unbelievable. They knew very well how difficult Zhuan Xianji's situation was. He had burned away all his essence, energy, and spirit, even all traces of time and space, in the flames to gain supremely enhanced combat power. While this power was terrifying, once he had burned everything away, it would be utter annihilation. Even worse than annihilation. Because with all traces of time and space burned away, it was as if Zhuan Xianji no longer existed in the realm of time and space. Unless one was a powerhouse of their level, no one in the world would remember Zhuan Xianji. He was truly and completely dead. Under these circumstances, even a celestial being descending to Earth couldn't save Zhuan Xianji. Yet now, he's been resolved by fellow Taoist Li? And this resolution happened so quietly, long after Li Heng left. They only then realized that Zhuan Xianji hadn't been completely burned away, and the flames had unknowingly extinguished. Has fellow Taoist Li's cultivation level reached such a high level? They were filled with Gan 3 Kai 3, a complex emotion encompassing both admiration and awe. This. Zhuan Xianji's expression was somewhat bitter. Because after briefly examining his own situation, he discovered that not only had he not completely died, but he had also been resurrected, transforming from a dead person living in the past into a living person living in the present. What kind of power was this? Zhuan Xianji couldn't imagine it. He also knew that no matter how mysterious Li Heng's methods were, or how unfathomable his strength was, he had paid a considerable price to achieve this, and he didn't know how he could repay it. Thinking of how he had just cursed fellow Taoist Li, he felt even more ashamed. After a brief silence, he sighed deeply. All right, an apology needs some sincerity. I'd better focus on fulfilling fellow Taoist Li's instructions first, otherwise, even if I go to apologize, it will be a flimsy gesture. His sentimental expression slowly transformed into a cold, serious one, like the will of heaven, as he cast his gaze upon the aristocratic family's territory, causing the remaining powerful members to tremble with fear. At this moment, the world was in an uproar. The terrifying figure had previously brought the world to a standstill. No one could withstand its ferocious power. Countless beings were filled with a panic of impending doom, feeling that everything was about to end. But at the final moment, Li Heng, whom they had assumed was dead, this great being who had opened the cycle of reincarnation, actually reappeared, smashing the terrifying figure with an incredibly powerful punch and resolving the crisis. Therefore, countless people were filled with gratitude towards Li Heng, and also felt a sense of relief at surviving such a catastrophe. While many powerful figures in the present world were overjoyed and grateful to Li Heng, they also realized that the aristocratic families were doomed. They all turned against them, abandoning the previous respect for the families. Those who had previously pledged allegiance to the families were now in a state of extreme panic, fleeing for their lives to avoid being caught in the crossfire. Those who had intended to join but hadn't had the chance were even more relieved and joined the attack on the aristocratic families. The world is complex and never lacks opportunists. Within the aristocratic families, bad news kept pouring in. The Taoist sect has attacked us. The Buddhist sect has attacked dozens of our outposts. The successor of the Sword sect has appeared and killed our aristocratic family's prodigy. The dynasties are even planning to expel us from their ranks. How laughable. Some of the royal families of these dynasties are clearly aristocratic families themselves, traitors. The gathered top experts of the aristocratic families wore grim expressions. Were their aristocratic families, which had endured for millennia, about to collapse? A sense of resentment rose in their hearts. Don't panic, we still have a sliver of hope. The river of time hasn't completely disappeared, summoning a ray. A top-tier aristocratic expert at the peak of the celestial realm wanted to say something to boost morale, but before he could finish speaking, the river of time, which stretched across the heavens and earth, completely dissipated, returning to the world. At the same time, the summoning array they had just formed using the blood sacrifice of 10 celestial realm experts also shattered at this moment, turning into specks of light and dissipating. The expert who had wanted to speak suddenly fell silent. Suddenly, the experts felt a gaze upon them. Their expressions changed drastically, and they roared, "Run!" However, before they could make a move, Zhuang Xianji appeared before these aristocratic experts, speaking indifferently. Ordered to clean up the aristocratic families, where are you going? Li Heng was currently traversing the void, accompanied by the celestial goddess Yan Yao. He observed everything that was happening in the world and smiled as he spoke. You should be much more relaxed now. That monster, the celestial, is finished. Upon hearing this, Tian Yao nodded obediently. Although the pollution at the source level continues, without that monster of heaven, my freedom of movement will indeed be greater. Thank you, Li Heng. The goddess expressed her gratitude directly. That's not necessary. This was bound to happen. Li Heng said with a smile. If the goddess Yan Yao resolved the monster of heaven for her own safety, then he resolved it for source power. Now, 10 million points of source power was indeed a huge profit. Tian Yao nodded, unsure of what to say. But soon, she stretched out her palm, and a small spatial cube appeared on it. A black dot was bouncing around inside the cube. This is for you, a gift. Li Heng looked at it closely, raising an eyebrow slightly in surprise. Because the black dot trapped in this special cube was none other than the leader of the Sunset Organization, a humanoid silhouette. He had searched the entire mortal world before but couldn't find this leader of the Sunset Organization. Now he realized that he had fallen into Tian Yao's hands. After you slew the monster queen, my control over the present world increased further. I inadvertently discovered that this guy was using a secret technique to escape, and the technique was filled with the aura of time, Tian Yao explained softly. Li Heng seemed thoughtful. It seemed that the background of this Sunset Organization leader was not simple either. Could he, like the aristocratic families, also come from the future? Thinking about it that way, it made a lot of sense. To talk about a sunset in a world created by the great sun with such confidence, his origin could only be from the future, before the great sun and the figure of that immortal god. Thank you, this provides me with clues about the future, Li Heng said, accepting the special cube. Tian Yao nodded slightly, glad he liked it. Now let's see the background of this future reborn person. He had already arrived at the restaurant where Xiao Hao was, looking at the drunken reborn person, and smiled slightly. Chapter 346 Future Monster. Young Master Xiao, please stop drinking. The cataclysmic calamity has clearly been resolved. The monk and Taoist priest looked helplessly at Xiao Hao, who was still drinking and completely drunk, and tried to persuade him. Xiao Hao ignored them, his heart breaking. What kind of cataclysmic calamity was this? As a future reborn person, possessing great fortune, he should be the protagonist of the world, yet various unexpected events were constantly slipping out of his control, leaving him powerless. He was now truly doubting himself. What was the point of his rebirth? To gain various opportunities ahead of time, to become stronger, to become the strongest? But now, all the familiar things he knew had disappeared, and the world was developing in a direction unfamiliar to him. Was it to save the world, to save all living beings? That was what he had originally thought. Then he realized he was powerless, too weak, with powerful beings emerging in the world, even those stronger than celestial beings, resolving a series of cataclysmic crises. He, the reborn person, was practically dispensable. He was going crazy. This wasn't how the script was written. Suddenly, the void beside them rippled, and Li Heng and the goddess of heaven, Tian Yao, emerged from it. They looked around. All they saw were shattered pieces of wine jars and the pungent smell of alcohol. Li Heng calmly looked at Xiao Hao and spoke softly. Future reincarnated individual, you are involved in illegal reincarnation, violating Article 1376, Item 24 of the Time and Space Administration. Come with me. Xiao Hao was stunned, then looked bewildered. What was this suddenly appearing powerhouse talking about? The Time and Space Administration? He'd never heard of it. But how could this powerhouse, who had met them back at Hundred Saints Mountain, know he was a future reincarnated individual? How did he know? How could this be? This fact shocked him. The sea of alcohol in his mind instantly receded, and he jolted awake, realizing the gravity of the situation. What should he do? He was terrified, cold sweat beading on his forehead. Senior, what are you saying? I don't understand, Xiao Hao stammered. Li Heng raised an eyebrow slightly. This future reincarnated individual still wants to play along? But he had no time for acting with Xiao Hao, and continued indifferently, your affair is over. Reincarnation disrupts the order of space-time. Are you still going to pretend? Oh, right, your companion has confessed. He reached out, revealing the small special cube imprisoning the humanoid silhouette of the Sunset Organization. The cube fell to the ground, growing to the size of a person, revealing the humanoid silhouette. The trapped humanoid silhouette seemed unable to see the outside world, frantically using various secret techniques to ram into the special barrier like a headless fly, but each time it failed. Suddenly, a storm raged in his heart. How could such a thing exist in this era? He couldn't understand. What, it seems you really know him. Li Heng smiled slightly. He originally just wanted to make a joke and tease Xiao Hao, not thinking he could learn anything from this. But now it seemed that Xiao Hao did indeed know some information. At this moment, Xiao Hao also realized he couldn't play dumb anymore. This senior has presented such compelling evidence that he's clearly convinced of Xiao Hao's identity. If he continues to feign ignorance, he'll be dead in a heartbeat. Reporting to senior, I do recognize this thing. Xiao Hao exhaled a deep breath, seemingly trying to expel all the alcohol from his brain and maintain his clarity to face this life or death moment. Enough with the nonsense. Li Heng nodded to the monk and Taoist beside him, then turned his gaze back to Xiao Hao, speaking calmly. Xiao Hao was startled. That look in this person's eyes. Could this unfathomably powerful expert already know the monk and Taoist? And could this lead to deeper deduction? Was the monk and Taoist sent by this powerful figure? A chill ran down his spine. Did this mean that he'd been discovered the moment he was reborn? His pride vanished instantly, and under the subtle pressure from Li Heng, he quickly cowered, blurting out, reporting to senior, this is a human. Li Heng's expression was strange as he carefully examined the humanoid silhouette. It was entirely black, Its outline defined by lines, like a cartoon figure. You're telling me this is a human? Xiao Hao realized his description was inaccurate, inwardly cursing himself for being drunk and making a mistake. He quickly added, afraid of displeasing Li Heng, this is one of the branches of the future human race. Their official name is the Shadow Race. A branch of the future human race? From what you're saying, in that so-called future, the human race also underwent some strange changes. Li Heng calmly speculated. Xiao Hao's face hardened upon hearing this. Senior is right. The process of the world's transformation will never stop. When the transformation reaches a critical point, the environment will no longer be suitable for the survival of the previous beings. Therefore, in order to continue to survive, the human race can only actively embody the mutation, differentiating into various branches to adapt to the world. Some branches are too extreme and have completely become monsters, like the Shadow Clan. However, most can still maintain their human form, only tainted by some aura, like my original self. Li Heng nodded thoughtfully. Zhuan Xianji had mentioned this before. Now it was directly confirmed by this future reborn person. So what will the future be like? Xiao Hao was somewhat bewildered upon hearing this. Before his rebirth, he was just a nobody, and a playboy who indulged in pleasure. He knew which brothel women were skilled in martial arts. As for the future situation, how could he possibly know? However, he suddenly felt that if he didn't speak frankly, he would probably be killed by this terrifying being. Remembering some rumors, he quickly spoke up. It should be quite bad, right? He confirmed with some doubt. Because some powerful individuals who didn't completely transform into monsters attempted to leave the mortal world and travel to the Great Void, but they all failed. I've heard that some even died because of this, roaring things like it's not the right time before they died. Not the right time? Li Heng's tone was subtle. He considered a possibility. This might also be the reason why things from the future covet the present. So, do you know the origin of that terrifying figure? Not dwelling on that point, Li Heng began to ask more specific questions. He had figured it out. This future reborn person was probably a useless person before their rebirth. Xiao Hao's expression immediately turned terrified upon hearing this. Senior, that really is a monster. Can I not tell you? No, Li Heng replied calmly. You only have two choices. To tell or not to tell. Telling might save your life, not telling will kill you. Choose. While he was rambling with Xiao Hao, he was also analyzing this future reborn person, breaking through the historical fog surrounding them in hopes of obtaining deeper information. Alright, I'll tell you then. Sensing the killing intent emanating from Li Heng, Xiao Hao shuddered, deciding he should just tell him. In this era, surely the monster wouldn't sense his presence? He paused for a moment, then slowly began, Senior, that monster is. Chapter 347 Three Monsters. That monster is one of the manifestations of a mysterious power. In the future, the world will continue to deteriorate, and calamities will descend upon all. Normal beings walking on the street could be mutated at any moment, turning into mindless, frantically writhing monsters. And it was at this time that these monsters appeared. They claimed to be the embodiment of the calamity, the manifestation of a mysterious power, yet they possessed a degree of rationality. Even after their appearance, the previously distorted laws of heaven and earth began to vaguely return to normal. The biggest change is that the laws of heaven and earth, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, will no longer suddenly turn into writhing worms, leaping onto people's faces, sucking flesh and devouring souls. But after that, humanity began to completely differentiate, actively absorbing that mysterious power to adapt to the world. Normal beings in the world completely disappeared. Xiao Hao slowly explained the origin of the terrifying figure. Li Heng nodded thoughtfully after listening. This is equivalent to materializing and personifying this inexplicable calamity and mysterious power, intending to accelerate the collapse of heaven and earth? But that's acceptable. Because of his previous encounters with these inexplicable calamities and mysterious forces, he hadn't encountered a single rational monster or anything personified, making it impossible for him to investigate their background. But now, it seemed there was an opportunity. If he could capture these rational monsters and extract information from them, perhaps he could learn part of the truth about the calamities and thus take countermeasures. Perhaps personified calamities could erode the world faster. However, compared to impersonal ones, these personified calamities were actually a downgrade, easier to deal with sufficient power. It seemed he had gained another reason to travel to the future. Now, Li Heng remained silent, and Xiao Hao dared not utter a sound, standing there with a trembling heart, fearing he would be crushed to death by this terrifying being at any moment. Li Heng slowly regained his senses and looked at Xiao Hao. He had already analyzed this future reincarnated individual quite thoroughly, sensing the aura of time and the imprint of the future from their true spirit and body. However, there was only one mark, and it was somewhat ethereal, seemingly capable of disappearing at any moment. He couldn't grasp the exact coordinates of that future space-time. After thinking for a moment, Li Heng snapped his fingers. The special cube that had trapped the humanoid silhouette instantly dissipated, and the silhouette regained its freedom. However, before it could react, a terrifying suppressive force descended upon it again, rendering it unable to move or mobilize any power. Li Heng pointed at Xiao Hao and calmly asked, "Do you know this person?" The humanoid silhouette finally reacted, startled, realizing it had indeed fallen into Li Heng's hands. It intended to remain silent, even at the cost of death, rather than reveal any information. When it saw Xiao Hao, it was momentarily stunned. But its expression quickly returned to calm. "Silence?" Li Heng laughed. "Unwilling to speak, huh? I'll speak for you." With another snap, he snapped his fingers. The humanoid silhouette's expression immediately turned to terror. It sensed that a sliver of its consciousness had suddenly split off. As if betraying its master, fighting against its main consciousness, and ultimately gaining the upper hand under a strange force. And so, he spoke. The humanoid silhouette looked at Li Heng obsequiously and said, "Greetings, Master." "No, he's not my master. What's going on? Why can't I control myself?" In his mind, the humanoid silhouette's main consciousness roared in terror. He realized he could no longer control his body and was even being pushed back by the rebellious subconscious attack. "Speak, what do you know?" Li Heng asked calmly. Xiao Hao, standing beside him, shuddered at the sight. This was one of the future Shadow Clan, a monster with incredibly mysterious methods, yet he couldn't even last a second against this terrifying being? Who was the real monster? He was terrified. "This person is likely the work of some rebels," the humanoid silhouette said respectfully. This humanoid silhouette clearly knew more than Xiao Hao, describing the future situation in just a few words. For example, there were 3 monsters manifesting this calamity. The one Li Heng punched back to the future was called Fear. The humanoid silhouette belonged to another group, called Evil. As for the last one, he was mysterious and unpredictable. Even the humanoid silhouette's name was unknown. In the future, because of the appearance of these 3 monsters, humanity had begun to stray from its name, degenerating into various monsters, serving these 3 largest monsters as gods. Those who disobeyed these 3 monsters were rebels. "Is the 3rd monster called the True Gospel?" Li Heng asked abruptly. Upon hearing this, the humanoid silhouette looked blank. "Reporting to Master, I have no recollection." Li Heng nodded, saying nothing more. He had initially thought that True Gospel was related to the future, but now that suspicion seemed lessened. Even if the 3rd monster was mysterious, it couldn't be so mysterious that no one could recall it, could it? He shook his head slightly. It seemed he still needed to confirm it personally. He planned to continue questioning. Suddenly, Li Heng noticed the humanoid silhouette's body was collapsing rapidly, but strangely, the silhouette seemed oblivious, still standing respectfully. However, Xiao Hao beside him panicked upon seeing this. "It's appeared. This is definitely the monster's punishment. This Shadow Clan member has leaked information, he's doomed." Sure enough. Although Li Heng acted quickly, he found he couldn't stop the humanoid silhouette from collapsing. This collapse seemed to be rooted in the deepest part of its origin. Unless he used his source power, he couldn't stop it. However, after sensing the depletion of his source power, he immediately gave up. The humanoid silhouette wasn't worth that much. He'd already given all the information he wanted, so let it die. After thinking for a moment, Li Heng even acted preemptively, slapping the humanoid silhouette to death, gaining 600,000 source power. 600,000 source power was enough to make him a figurehead, faintly surpassing the celestial realm, and possibly even the direct culprit behind the interruption of the Great Sun Path in the past. Unfortunately, he still had to die. Xiao Hao was dumbfounded, expressing his incomprehension. Hadn't the Shadow Clan already submitted to this person? Even if this person couldn't protect the Shadow Clan, they should at least pretend, right? Killing them prematurely, was that really a good idea? Extrapolating from this, he couldn't help but think of his own fate. Would he really be slapped to death too? Clapping his hands to clean the dust, Li Heng looked at Xiao Hao again. At this moment, he had completely analyzed this future reincarnated individual, thoroughly dispelling the fog of future history surrounding him, and seeing some strange things. For example, when Li Heng reached out, Xiao Hao felt something jump out of his mind, and then something actually jumped out, a book and a small stone platform. He was completely dumbfounded. This was his Heavenly Dao book and Heavenly Secret platform. His hidden foundation, his supreme treasure of heaven and earth, his unparalleled opportunity. A golden finger essential for transmigration and rebirth. Chapter 348 The Truth of Rebirth. What are these things? The Heavenly Dao book and the Heavenly Mystery platform floated in the air, emanating an inexplicable Taoist aura, clearly not ordinary objects. Li Heng smiled slightly, looking at Xiao Hao, who was completely stunned. Xiao Hao's face showed bitterness. This time, even his secrets had been exposed. He had originally thought that this terrifying being couldn't detect the Heavenly Dao book and the Heavenly Mystery platform, and that these two treasures might be able to turn the tide for him. But now it seemed that he had overestimated himself. Reporting to Senior, these are the 10 great treasures of the future. One is called the Heavenly Dao book, which records the laws and principles of heaven and earth, and the other is called the Heavenly Mystery platform, which can deduce heavenly secrets and foresee the future. He said respectfully, not daring to conceal anything. After all, judging from the current situation, even if the Heavenly Dao book and the Heavenly Mystery platform were combined, their status would be far inferior to this terrifying being, and they would be insignificant. Li Heng raised an eyebrow slightly. The two names were indeed apt. He could sense that the book contained extremely vast laws and rules of order of heaven and earth, seemingly exhausting all the laws of heaven and earth and backing them up here, which could be called the Heavenly Dao. Could that Heavenly Mystery platform be related to Zhuan Xianji? When he first entered the ruined cavern of the Heavenly Fate organization, he had stepped onto a large Heavenly Mystery platform. After thinking for a moment, he sent a thought across tens of thousands of miles, summoning Zhuan Xianji. Almost instantly, Zhuan Xianji stepped forward and appeared before Li Heng. Thank you for your help, fellow Taoist. The aristocratic families have been dealt with almost completely, he said, bowing respectfully to Li Heng, his expression somewhat ashamed. After all, if it weren't for Li Heng's intervention, he would have long since burned to ashes and died, his name absent from history. It could be said that Li Heng had given him a second chance. Li Heng remained calm. It was merely a small favor. Faced with origin power, even death at this level could be averted. Moreover, the small expenditure of origin power, exchanged for a void heaven realm expert, was a stroke of luck for a strong person, a gain, not a loss. He went straight to the point. Do you recognize these two items before you? Oh, right, the anomaly you bet on. This reborn person from the future said the book is called the Book of Heavenly Dao, and the small stone platform is called the Heavenly Secret platform. Li Heng pointed to the two items before him and said calmly, the Book of Heavenly Dao? Zhuan Xianji was taken aback. To be honest, the Heavenly Secret platform is my doing, it was my previous bet. But this Book of Heavenly Dao, to be honest, I have no recollection of it, and even after careful calculation, I am still confused. The truth seems to be shrouded in a veil of mist. Li Heng nodded upon hearing this, without saying anything. It was obvious. The Book of Heavenly Dao was definitely the work of a future powerhouse. Many guesses arose in Li Heng's mind. The Book of Heavenly Dao might be a database that backed up the normal laws of heaven and earth. After all, in that desperate future, the laws of heaven and earth were corrupted and abnormal. At this moment, Xiao Hao gritted his teeth and spoke tremblingly. Reporting to the two seniors, what exactly do you mean by betting on this anomaly? The chill in his heart had reached its peak. He realized that the Heavenly Mystery platform, which he thought was a priceless treasure, was actually someone else's doing. Moreover, he had a vague premonition that his rebirth into the past was definitely not accidental. Oh, you mean this? Ask this old man, Li Heng said, pointing to the culprit, the person in charge, Zhuan Xianji. Zhuan Xianji coughed upon hearing this, looking at Xiao Hao with a mixture of anger and resentment towards his misfortune and lack of ambition. After all, he had truly wasted his time and placed bets in vain. Please don't be angry with what I'm about to say, young friend, he said, giving Xiao Hao a heads up. I cultivate the Dao of heavenly secrets, and possess a meager ability to glimpse the future. I sense turbulence in the future, an unexpected variable arising, and that variable is you, young friend. As a future reincarnated being, you must know the despair of that ultimate future, almost a predetermined fate. But there is always hope in the unseen world. Perhaps the true variable can change destiny. Therefore, after your rebirth, I chose to invest in you, allowing the heavenly secret platform to appear naturally in a way you can accept, as your protective treasure, while also appointing the monk Taoist as your protector. Unfortunately, plans don't always go as expected. Zhuan Xianji shook his head, somewhat sighing. Xiao Hao was completely dumbfounded, looking at the monk Taoist, who smiled in response, seemingly acknowledging it. So his rebirth was a joke, known to everyone? Wait, why didn't plans keep up with changes? Also, wasn't the Heavenly Dao book your work? Xiao Hao still clung to a sliver of hope. The Book of Heavenly Dao is not my work. However, observing it, I find it infinitely profound, recording the laws of heaven and earth. It must be the work of some powerful being in the future. And your rebirth, young friend, should also be due to that powerful being. As for the changes, he looked at Li Heng hesitantly, seemingly seeking Li Heng's opinion. Li Heng smiled and nodded, indicating that Zhuan Xianji could do as he pleased. Zhuan Xianji then spoke again. The changes are mainly due to fellow Taoist Li beside me. I have no ill intentions towards you, young friend. I only wish to protect you, the variable, as you grow to peak powerhouse, and then protect the present world, becoming the savior of all beings. However, at this time, fellow Taoist Li appeared. He resolved the frequent calamities between heaven and earth, exceeding my expectations. Now he's even stronger than me. In this way, you no longer need to bear the burden of saving heaven and earth. Zhuan Xianji spoke with some emotion, displaying remarkable intelligence and tact. To grow to this level in such a short time and resolve all calamities is not just a legend, but an unreasonable, overwhelming, dimensional reduction attack. However, to deal with an overwhelming calamity, perhaps someone like fellow Taoist Li is needed. Xiao Hao fell completely silent. It seemed he really was a joke. His rebirth was not only orchestrated by others, but also detected immediately after his rebirth, meaning every step he took was calculated. Even so, being manipulated and becoming a pawn of a powerful figure was one thing, at least it proved he had some use. But now, with Li Heng's appearance, it was clear he had no use whatsoever, and his so-called rebirth had become a joke. Young friend, don't be discouraged, think positively. Not having to face the calamity directly, isn't that good? Zhuan Xianji comforted Xiao Hao. Li Heng ignored the dejected Xiao Hao, focusing his gaze on the Heavenly Dao book, finding it quite interesting, its depth faintly radiating an aura of the future. If he could extract this aura, perhaps he could truly condense a future imprint and calculate the future space-time coordinates. But then, the void rippled. A leg covered in armor stepped out from the void. Xiao Hao was still feeling down, but when he saw the sudden visitor's full appearance, he exclaimed in surprise, "Father, what brings you here?" The visitor was none other than Xiao Hao's father, the greatly Western king. Chapter 349 The Three Saints of the Future. How could I protect you, brat, if I didn't come? King Zili glared at Xiao Hao, then cupped his hands in greeting to Li Heng and Zhuan Xianji. Great Zhuan King Zili Xiao Lishan, on behalf of the three future saints, greets you two seniors. Xiao Hao shuddered upon hearing this. What was going on? How did his father also know about the future? He felt increasingly like a clown. How could everyone know about this rebirth? The future, the three saints? Li Heng raised an eyebrow. You're also a reborn person like Xiao Hao? King Zili shook his head. I was just lucky enough to glimpse a corner of the future, and I once came into contact with the three future human saints and reached a cooperation agreement with them. But now it seems that this has failed. As he spoke, he sighed. Then what is your purpose? Li Heng asked with a half-smile. King Zili spoke. My purpose was to save the world from peril, to turn the tide, and to use the power of the future to change the present. However, with two of you present, it seems unnecessary. As for the purpose of those three sages, it might be related to this Heavenly Dao book. He looked at the Heavenly Dao book floating in the air, emanating a profound and mysterious Taoist aura, seemingly a collection of worldly laws, his expression complex, lost in thought. Li Heng seemed thoughtful. Were these so-called three future sages the human powerhouses still stubbornly resisting in the future? So, what is the purpose of your visit? He looked at King Zili, getting straight to the point. To protect this good-for-nothing brat. After all, Whether now or in the future, he is still my son. By the way, those 3 future sages wish to make contact with you too. King Zili didn't hide anything, speaking frankly. How do you make contact? The key lies in this book of Heavenly Dao. King Zili walked to the book of Heavenly Dao, opened its pages, and golden light burst forth. The laws of heaven and earth, the rules of order recorded in the book, began to gush forth, manifesting various strange phenomena. Lotus flowers descended from the sky, golden lotuses sprang from the earth, the sun and moon shone brightly, and so on. Finally, all the phenomena merged, actually condensing into a small phantom of a river of time. Although its power seemed to be inferior to the real river of time, it seemed to be able to communicate between the past, present, and future. And on this phantom of the river of time, 3 phantoms slowly emerged. Judging by their ages, one was old, one was young, and one was middle-aged. Sensing the aura of the 3 phantoms, Li Heng's eyes flickered. How interesting. He knew that these 3 phantoms were not on the void Dao realm, nor were they simply in the void heaven realm, but rather were between the void heaven and the void Dao, mixed with a trace of strange time power. These could be considered 3 extraordinary people. No wonder they could withstand those 3 monsters for so long. Zhuan Xianji beside him was extremely surprised. This method is truly ingenious. It actually concealed a small fragment of the river of time within the Heavenly Dao book, using it as a starting point to traverse time and space and connect with the present. He hadn't taken the title of the 3 saints seriously when he first heard it. After all, not just any Tom, Dick, or Harry could be called a saint. Not everyone is fellow Taoistly. But now it seems they really have some skill? Xiao Hao's eyes widened in disbelief. Could these 3 be the culprits behind his rebirth? Could they also traverse time like those 3 monsters? But when he was in the future, how come he didn't know about the so-called 3 saints? Was his knowledge truly too shallow? The 3 saints of the future greet you 2 fellow Daoists. The 3 illusory figures spoke loudly, bowing in greeting. What do you want from me? Li Heng didn't mince words, getting straight to the point. The 3 illusory figures exchanged glances, with the older one speaking first. Firstly, I naturally want to thank you, fellow Taoist, for your help in injuring the true form of the monster called fear in the future, slowing down its fall and temporarily saving us from being annihilated by those monsters. Li Heng waved his hand. No need, it was just a small favor. But since you've mentioned monsters, you must have dealt with those 3 monsters frequently. Do you know the name of the 3rd monster? The 3 illusory figures were taken aback, seemingly not expecting Li Heng to know this. The older one pondered for a moment before continuing, to be honest, fellow Taoist, we don't know the name of the 3rd monster either. We suspect that the 3rd monster hasn't appeared yet and is still in the process of gestation. But in our speculation, once that monster is successfully gestated, that will be the time of annihilation and fall. Therefore, we also call the 3rd monster the End. The End? Li Heng was surprised and raised an eyebrow. They really dared to give it such a name, weren't they afraid it would come true? But this didn't seem to have much to do with the true gospel. Could it be that the true gospel really didn't come from the future? For a moment, Li Heng was somewhat confused. Could it be that the true gospel comes from beyond this world, from the vast void beyond heaven and earth? Even now, with this so-called hopeless future appearing, Li Heng still doesn't underestimate the danger emanating from the vast void. When he spoke with that illusory immortal figure, he already knew that the present world had reached an extremely dangerous position, the lower reaches of the vast void, a river section filled with all sorts of strange and bizarre things. Moreover, when the red-haired monster he encountered left this world by walking along the broken path of reincarnation, traversing the vast void, he took the opportunity to attach his divine sense to the red-haired monster and discovered some things. For example, many remnants floated in the vast void. Remnants of the world. If the red-haired monster hadn't been unable to leave the broken path of reincarnation and could only stand on it looking out at the vast void, he would have wanted to influence the red-haired monster to see those remnants. I see. Then I understand. Li Heng nodded. Also, I will soon travel to the future. I wish you success in slaying those 3 monsters, then you won't need to worry about their threat. Thinking of something else, Li Heng added casually. The 3 illusory figures were stunned. Traveling to the future to slay monsters? You really dare to dream. The older illusory figure quickly tried to dissuade him. Fellow Taoist, you don't understand. The future is the domain of those monsters. In their domain, they can unleash even greater power. No living being can stand against them. Fellow Taoist, please reconsider. It's alright, Li Heng replied calmly. Aside from the mysterious third monster, he didn't care about the other two. If he didn't even have a little confidence, how could he cultivate? He might as well just find a block of tofu and smash his head against it. Seeing Li Heng's confidence, the three illusory figures exchanged bewildered glances. Are the strong of this era really that confident? I think the three of you should also trust fellow Taoist Li, Zhuang Xianji chimed in. The three illusory figures were quite helpless. It was one thing for the younger ones to say that, youthful arrogance, after all. But you, so old, clearly having lived a long time, didn't you see the current situation clearly? And you still expect them to believe? Would a normal person believe in a world of perfect harmony in the next moment? They went to great lengths to connect with a present from the future, not to have Li Heng join them in killing the three monsters, but to find a way to escape. They never expected Li Heng to do this. Don't you three believe me? Li Heng said calmly. The three illusory figures fell silent. How should they answer? To be honest, they didn't believe him. But to say it directly would be disrespectful to this fellow Taoist. Li Heng then laughed. Don't worry, three fellow Taoists. I'm not asking for your opinions, I'm just informing you that I will soon descend upon the future, an unstoppable fact. After these words, the three illusory figures remained silent for a long time. Finally, the old one sighed and spoke. Then we await your good news, fellow Taoist. The next moment, the three illusory figures vanished. The small illusory river of time shattered instantly. The two sides seemed to have parted on bad terms. In that predetermined future, three figures stood in the void. The present world had already been distorted and corrupted. The earth writhed, flesh and blood were mangled, and the air was filled with spiritual insects with ferocious mouths. The chains of order twisted and turned, their gaping maws opening wide, and monsters roared as they roamed the ground. What do we do now? Fear is injured, but not severely. It will recover quickly and launch a further attack on the three of us. We will be caught sooner or later. You know, our presence among humans is fading. Many people have already forgotten us. And there aren't many normal humans left. The middle-aged man sighed. HMPH, that man speaks so arrogantly, claiming to descend into the future and slay monsters? Let's not even talk about whether he has the ability to come to the future. Even if he did, so what? Both spiritual energy and the laws of heaven and earth have been completely distorted. Only a last trace of normal origin remains to sustain heaven and earth. That man will probably be rejected by the distorted laws as soon as he arrives in the future, causing his cultivation level to drop and his power to be destroyed. The young-looking figure was full of disdain. Alice, plans can't keep up with changes. If that person hadn't appeared, and history had followed its original trajectory, the pawn we planted might have already grown up and started communicating with us. The middle-aged man sighed again. That's right. No matter the era, the world is doomed. The only way to survive is to descend into this era, which truly borders the great void, and leave this world. That person actually dares to dream of killing these monsters? How is that possible? The young man chimed in, his voice filled with anger. This is a waste of their life force. They want to leave this world, but can't because they are in a future that is destined to happen, but hasn't happened yet. They don't border the great void and can't escape. But the beings in the present era are much happier. The world borders the great void. Even if such a calamity occurs, they can escape to the great void and remain safe. They desperately need such a life force, yet it's being squandered by the powerful beings of the present era. They are truly ungrateful. Don't be pessimistic. With that person's abilities and a heavenly Dao book, he can definitely capture the accurate space-time coordinates and arrive in the future, the old figure said. But so what? Are we just going to be food for those monsters? Don't forget the terror of that third monster, it's far beyond our capabilities. That monster isn't even fully formed yet, but we still can't muster the will to resist, the young figure retorted. Don't worry, we don't need to help him. We just need to capture the key moment that person descends into the future, and then we'll use that moment to sneak into the present, without needing the beings of this era to guide us, and then leave this world, the old figure slowly said. This was the reason they parted on bad terms. It wasn't that they disliked Li Heng. Rather, their goals were fundamentally conflicting. They wanted to escape, while Li Heng wanted to fight. Chapter 350 Creation Factors. Li Heng shook his head. So these were the future three saints? Nothing special. Although they hadn't stated their purpose in contacting him, Li Heng could sense it wasn't anything important. Perhaps it was important to them, but definitely not to him. Judging from their attitude, they seemed to have no confidence in slaying the monsters, saving the world, and eliminating the calamity. Their contact was probably just a pretext for running away. Li Heng thought leisurely, turning his gaze to King Zai Lai. King Zai Lai was somewhat embarrassed. He had thought that the contact between the future three saints and these two terrifying beings would bring some new opportunities, but it ended badly. What was he, the middleman, supposed to do? However, he was generally inclined to side with the future three saints. After all, to descend before their own time and slay three monsters sounded absurd and arrogant. Rather than indulging in such fantasies, it was better to face reality and unite. King Zai Lai sighed inwardly. I'll borrow this Heavenly Dao book for a while. You have no objections, right? Li Heng said calmly. The Heavenly Dao book slowly fell into his hand, moving without wind, revealing its rules. Xiao Hao nodded hastily. Who would dare object? Seniors, may I take my son and leave? King Zili approached Xiao Hao and asked. Now that this unexpected turn of events had occurred, and the two sides couldn't reach an agreement, he needed to return and reconsider. The world was constantly deteriorating, and that hadn't changed. Zhuan Xianji turned his gaze to Li Heng, letting him make the decision. You may leave, but I might need you in the future. Just be prepared, Li Heng said indifferently. Anyway, this reborn person hadn't offended him, and he had no reason to take a life. As long as the reborn person was sensible and didn't cause trouble, he wouldn't bother with him. Upon hearing this, Xiao Hao and King Zili breathed a sigh of relief. Thank you for your mercy, Senior, King Zili bowed again. Then, the next moment, they froze in place. Because the world had stopped again. Li Heng remained calm, unsurprised, looking at the divine figure that had suddenly descended from the great sun, and spoke. I think you're a bit late, aren't you? After all, the previous great battle was over. The immortal figure shook his head. You can't say that. I'm very far from here. Most of my timelines died, only the version of myself from the very beginning is alive and running. I needed to traverse vast distances of time and space to arrive here. You have to understand. Besides, I'm not exactly late. He sighed, staring at Li Heng with a complex expression. I never imagined your growth rate would be so fast. I thought you'd be stuck for a long time after advancing to the Void Heaven realm, at least a few years, maybe even hundreds of years, but it's only been a few days. Li Heng smiled slightly. A scholar should be looked at with new eyes after 3 days' absence. The immortal figure shook his head slightly. Never mind, I should have thought of that earlier. The fact that you can produce power I don't recognize is an unpredictable variable, so its origin must be astonishing. It's not surprising that you can grow at this rate. He smiled bitterly, seemingly trying to convince himself. However, although I don't know what method you used to break through so quickly, I advise you to pause for a while and prepare for the next realm, creation. The immortal figure became serious and said solemnly. Creation, creation, what kind of creation is it if you can't truly create a world? However, worlds vary in size and strength, and the strength of the world you create determines your power. You must strengthen your foundation. Li Heng nodded thoughtfully upon hearing this. Then what are the lower and upper limits of creation? He looked at the immortal figure curiously. He had originally intended to specifically seek out the immortal figure to ask about the next realm, but since the immortal figure had taken the initiative to appear, he didn't need to make another trip. Theoretically, there is no lower limit and no upper limit. However, in reality, under normal circumstances, it's probably the difference between a single star and a vast cosmos. Do you think that difference is significant? The immortal figure smiled enigmatically. Li Heng nodded. That difference is indeed quite large. If we consider the universe of his previous life, the Milky Way galaxy has 200 to 300 billion stars, and the observable universe has trillions upon trillions of galaxies. Yet, the observable universe is merely a tiny fraction of the truly vast universe. To put it another way, in mythology, the Queen Mother of the West could create a Milky Way with a single stroke of her silver hairpin. Therefore, she would have to make hundreds of billions of strokes to barely form an observable universe, and even that is still insignificant compared to the larger universe. It seems the gap in the creation stage is truly vast. Li Heng sighed, his expression remaining calm. Vast it is, anyway. He wasn't following the immortal god system, he was merely using it as a benchmark for his strength. Strictly speaking, he was still in the Dharma aspect realm. However, he was somewhat curious. What would happen if he completely opened up the 36 heavens, and then manifested countless heavens based on them, thus creating a world? Would he create a vast universe of myriad worlds? He suddenly found this quite interesting. He could develop in that direction. Okay, I understand what you're saying. I'll consider it. But you came all this way specifically to give me advice, right? Li Heng said with a smile. That's natural. Remember the true realm I told you about before? You've already reached the Void Deo level, and you're qualified to live in the true realm. The immortal figure said. Of course I haven't forgotten, but didn't you say you weren't in a hurry? Li Heng smiled slightly. I'm not in a hurry, but seeing you want to die makes me anxious. The immortal figure curled his lips. I can tell you, you'd better not go to that so-called destined future era. Because that era is not under my supervision, it's out of my control. If something unexpected happens, and you encounter something extraordinary, I can't save you. He warned Li Heng seriously. What, as the creator of heaven and earth, you're afraid of the future of heaven and earth? Li Heng raised an eyebrow. I wasn't afraid when I was at my peak, but now I have no choice. Besides, that future isn't a future that heaven and earth formed naturally, there are calamities and mysterious forces interfering. Could it be that there are creation-level monsters in the future? Li Heng asked in surprise. That's unlikely. Because if there really were monsters at the creation level, the future would have already overshadowed the present, leaving no chance for the present era to recover. But there might be factors related to creation. Even just one of these creation-level factors would be enough to give you a hard time, even death. Even if you're very strong now, invincible in the Void Deo realm, it wouldn't make a difference. Creation-level factors? Yes, like this. The immortal figure reached out, and an aura appeared on his palm. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.